Chapter 26. The final corridor led to a space filled with mirrors. As Seer stepped into the area, the corridor behind him vanished, leaving only a single path ahead. At the end of that path, more mirrors, forming both its sides and endpoint. That guy definitely took advantage of his role as the game master to sneak out, Seer muttered, rubbing the back of his neck as he stood in place. The mirrors in this space were all damaged, some shattered into mere shards, clinging stubbornly to their frames. Each broken mirror had its own unique pattern of destruction. The floor was littered with fragments, some reduced to glittering dust. Countless reflections of himself stared back from the jagged surfaces, mimicking his every move. Is this a puzzle? Seer wondered aloud, crouching to pick up a shard from the floor. He ran his fingers along its sharp edges, then glanced thoughtfully at the surrounding broken mirrors. The space was roughly 150 square meters, and the fragments on the floor likely numbered in the tens of thousands. Each piece was irregularly shaped, with no discernible pattern. Even if they were marked like puzzle pieces, putting together so many fragments would take far too long. Am I going to bleed out here? Seer sighed, glancing at the shattered mirrors and shards around him. He stuffed some tissues into his nose to prepare for the inevitable nosebleed. Carefully, he began sorting the fragments by size, arranging them neatly on the floor. Even the tiniest, nearly invisible pieces were meticulously collected and set aside. The process consumed a significant amount of time. What followed was a grueling, monotonous puzzle-solving session. Without a marker to label the fragments, Seer had to rely entirely on memory to recall the size and shape of each piece when needed. It was a mentally taxing task, akin to solving a complex NEN-based memory puzzle. Unnoticed, the tissue in his nose turned from white to deep red, but Seer remained unfazed, his gaze fixed on the fragments as he pressed them into place. When a shard touched the wall, it adhered as though by invisible glue, staying firmly in place. He needed to work faster, there was no telling how many more trials awaited him. To reach Banato port by January 1st, accounting for travel time and potential delays, he couldn't afford to linger here. The faster his mind worked, the steadier his hands became. Soon, one of the mirrors was nearly complete under his skillful reconstruction. Yet, Seer halted his progress. There's no fragment for this spot, he murmured, staring at the single gap left in the mirror. He glanced at the pieces still laid out on the floor. He was certain, every piece was accounted for, and none fit the missing space. Expression calm, he swapped out the blood-soaked tissue in his nose for fresh sheets and began assembling another mirror. Once again, the same problem arose, a missing piece. It wasn't that the mirrors were impossible to complete, they were incomplete by design. Hundreds of mirrors were pieced together under his hands, but each one had a conspicuous gap. Meanwhile, a small mountain of bloodied tissues grew in the corner. Seer suddenly stopped, dropping the fragment in his hand as he collapsed onto the floor. His breathing grew rapid and labored, interrupted by dry heaving. His body felt numb. Cold. The combined effects of blood loss, mental overexertion, and low blood sugar hit him all at once, overwhelming his senses. After a bout of heavy panting, he lay flat on the cold ground, chest heaving, face pale. His nose continued to bleed, staining his lower face and shirt collar with dried and fresh blood. He looked utterly defeated, as though he'd been mercilessly beaten into the dirt. Yet, despite it all, a laugh bubbled up from his chest. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Seer's laughter was filled with hysteria and just a touch of madness, so much so that tears glistened in his vivid blue eyes. Not bad. Not bad at all, this game. 64,892 pieces. Could have been harder. Why not bump it up to hundreds of thousands? As if exhausted from laughing, he sat up weakly, rummaged through his backpack, and pulled out a piece of bread and an apple, eating quickly to regain some strength. From the time I started piecing it together until now, 162,891 seconds have passed. Less than 2 days. It should be the 27th now. That means I still have time. After finishing his meal, he closed his eyes briefly to regulate his breathing. Then, standing again, he burned the blood-soaked tissues in a small fire to dispose of them. Seer stepped into the only remaining corridor. His hand brushed along the mirrored walls until he heard a click. One section of the mirror retracted, revealing a hidden chamber behind it. Inside was a table, a chair, and even a skeleton slumped in the corner. In the skeleton's hands lay a small, intricate box, crafted from a mysterious material, not quite metal, but extraordinarily sturdy. It was locked with a combination code. Of course, one blast of blue could force it open. But the contents would likely be destroyed along with the box. Recalling the missing fragments from the mirrors outside, Seer's instincts told him the box couldn't be forced open. He ran his fingers along the surface until he found a set of raised, uneven letters etched into the bottom. How many mirrors are here? How many mirrors? Did the individual shards count? Or just the complete ones? The code is 5 digits, so the answer should be, Seer whispered, twisting the lock mechanism. 66,666 pieces in total, including those scattered and those still intact. The lock clicked open with a satisfying sound. Inside was a single mirror fragment. Seer immediately matched the shard to one of the gaps in the mirrors outside. So, there must be similar fragments waiting in the other rooms. He pocketed the piece, exited, and moved into another chamber. In the second room, the box's bottom bore no words but instead 4 sets of letters from the Hunter script. The code was another 4 digits. Simple, Seer muttered. Using the standard sequence of the Hunter language, he cross-referenced the letters and connected the dots to reveal the code, 2733. The second box opened without trouble. The third box displayed an unknown set of shapes on the bottom. After several failed attempts to align and cancel the shapes, he tried again using segmentation and rearrangement, and succeeded. The fourth box featured 12 different symbols, still requiring a 4-digit code. All I need to do is group the symbols by type and sequence, Seer said, quickly inputting the numbers derived from their order. One by one, he cleared each room and solved every puzzle. Eventually, Seer returned to the main chamber, now armed with all the missing fragments. He inserted them one by one into the gaps in the mirrors. Once the last mirror was complete, the walls began to shift. They rotated and reassembled, erasing the previous corridors entirely. All the completed mirrors vanished, replaced by a massive, towering door. The door was enormous and heavy, but its keyhole was absurdly small, and no key was in sight. So, after finishing the puzzle, it's time to find a key. Seer smirked, sarcasm dripping from his tone. This pointless waste of time just never ends, does it? Well then, he muttered, cracking his knuckles, let's see if my old skills have gotten rusty. From his fingertips, a thin thread of nen extended, sliding delicately into the keyhole. Pressing his ear against the door, Seer enhanced his hearing with nen to listen for the slightest movements in the mechanism. Using nen threads as makeshift lockpicks, Seer deftly picked the lock. Years ago, he had learned this skill for a Dazai Osamu cosplay. Back then, he'd mastered using hairpins, wires, cards, even stiff paper to open locks. With a click, the door creaked open. Got it, he said, casually pushing the heavy door aside and stepping through. Beyond the door, there was no anticipated exit. Instead, it led to an empty hall, vast and barren. Enough already. Seer's voice was flat, his patience worn thin. Looking at the room, he wasted no time. He swapped his blood-stained clothes for a clean set on the spot. If you're telling me to carve my own path. He smirked darkly, raising both hands. Blue. Black and blue nen surged outward, flooding the entire hall. The underground space shook violently as walls crumbled under the relentless energy. Fine sand began to seep through the cracks, accompanied by the sound of collapsing structures. With a thunderous crash, the walls gave way. A torrent of golden desert sand poured in, threatening to bury the maze entirely. Whoa! Seer remained expressionless, immediately teleporting upward with Blue. He emerged above the chaos, shaking sand from his hair and clothes as he glanced down at the collapsing ruins. Yer, he sighed, adopting a mock-irritated tone. Almost ended up buried alive. Self-burial, at that. With a shrug, he brushed off the near disaster and casually moved forward, as if nothing had happened. What the hell did you do down there? A voice filled with disbelief rang out from below. The examiner, who had always appeared like a relaxed, wealthy middle-aged man, had lost his usual composure. What had this white-haired kid done in the desert maze? How had it collapsed? And how did he come out so quickly? Even though the examiner had high expectations for the boy, this was far beyond what he anticipated. After all, the desert test site was notoriously difficult, no examinee had ever passed it before. But here he was, walking out in under 3 days. As the examiner ran toward the commotion, questions filled his mind. Ah, that? The white-haired boy suddenly vanished from midair and reappeared beside the man, casually running alongside him with his hands behind his head. The examiner glanced over mid-stride, giving the boy a sidelong glance. Well, I got bored with the puzzles, so I just blew a path straight through. By the way, I'm not responsible for test site repairs, right? The boy's snow-white hair and vivid blue eyes gleamed under the desert sun. His smile was dazzling, arrogant and devilishly charming, completely at odds with his angelic appearance. It was the smile of a born troublemaker. The rumbling behind them subsided, and they stopped running. The examiner turned to look back at the desert. Just sand, endless yellow sand. An unconventional approach, huh? He scratched his head in frustration. Oh well, unconventional hunters weren't exactly rare. Don't worry about compensation. Any damages during the exam are covered by the Hunter Association, he sighed, finally answering the boy's question. At least he didn't have to pay for it. No problem then. By the way, do you know how to get to Banato Port? The boy asked casually. Though he knew Gordeau Desert was east of Banato Port, he had no idea where he currently was. Banato Port is that way. The examiner pointed in a random direction. As a licensed navigator, offering directions wasn't an issue. Got it. Thanks. The boy glanced in the indicated direction, nodded, and vanished again. I'm a little curious to see what this kid will accomplish as a hunter. The examiner murmured, shaking his head. The boy had vanished before he could even see him leave. With Blue, Seer traversed Gordeau Desert in record time and arrived at the nearest city. Today is December 28th. 3 days left until January 1st. There should be some transportation to Banato Port, he muttered, stepping into a jewelry store. Without hesitation, he dumped the contents of his bag onto the counter. Golden ornaments and sparkling gemstones glittered under the lights. Sir, you mean two? The clerk asked, startled but quickly recovering. Selling. You buying? The boy asked, impatiently raising an eyebrow. One moment, please. The clerk made a quick call, and moments later, a suited appraiser appeared. 3 minutes later, Seer left the store with a thick wad of cash. Without pause, he headed for a luxurious-looking hotel nearby. He booked a deluxe suite, cleaned up, and stood before a full-length mirror, admiring his reflection. White hair, blue eyes, pale skin, and distinct dark facial markings. Besides his facial structure, which still retained some familiarity, everything else had changed. He was practically unrecognizable. Still handsome. He nodded approvingly, brushing his teeth while staring at his reflection. No wonder he had over 1 million followers as a cosplayer. Though cosplay wasn't all about looks, appearance definitely helped. If he weren't good-looking, he wouldn't have gained such popularity. Of course, some relied on heavy photo editing. He'd seen profiles where the person barely resembled their pictures. Shaking his head, he sat on the bed and picked up the bedside phone, dialing the front desk. "I'd like breakfast sent to my room tomorrow morning. Also, please book me a ticket, any transport, to Banato Port," he instructed, flipping on the TV. Hanging up, he immediately collapsed onto the bed and drifted to sleep. Chapter 27. Seer slept from noon on the 28th straight through to the morning of the 29th, only waking when the sound of knocking at the door signaled the arrival of breakfast. Still groggy, he opened the door barefoot and shirtless, yawning as he greeted the server. "Pardon me, your breakfast service," the server announced, briefly glancing at the dark markings on the boy's chest and waist before quickly averting his gaze and wheeling the cart inside. Then, he left quietly. The luxurious and exquisitely prepared breakfast was well worth the substantial deposit Seer had left the previous day. The deluxe king-sized bed was just as comfortable. Although Seer wasn't picky, his time in Meteor City had nearly made him forget what decent living conditions felt like. Perfect timing. "I'm starving." After freshening up, Seer sat at the edge of the bed and dug into his breakfast. He brushed his teeth again afterward and got dressed. Underneath the breakfast tray was a train ticket, the one Seer had asked the hotel to arrange through the front desk. The ticket cost had already been deducted from his deposit. This was exactly why he chose a luxury hotel, efficient service with zero hassle. He glanced at the ticket before setting it aside and turning on the room's television. An afternoon train. Still plenty of time. Might as well check the news on the Hunter-exclusive channels. The 132nd female victim of the serial killer Kleiber Fall was discovered in the Republic of Rocario. Kleiber remains at large, and the bounty on his capture has risen to 1 billion jenny. An explosion in the Republic of Sigru has been confirmed to be the work of the A-class crime syndicate the Crows. The 286th Hunter exam is set to begin soon. Those aspiring to become hunters, don't miss it. The broadcast covered high-profile incidents from various regions of the world, interspersed with ads, including promotions for the Hunter exam. Who knew if the Hunter Association had paid for the airtime? Lying back on the bed, Seer listened to the broadcast as it lulled him back into a light doze. When he awoke again, he quickly packed his things. After a quick lunch, he slung his bag over his shoulder and left the hotel. Before heading out, he decided to test his Wheel of Law's ability again by drawing 3 cards at random. Upright Emperor, buff card. Reversed Wheel of Fortune, debuff card. Upright World, buff card. He immediately applied the Emperor and World buffs to himself. A moment later, his appearance changed, complete with a crown, regal cape, and ornate scepter. The Emperor card, much like the Hierophant, came with an automatic costume change. The World card's effect seemed subtler, gently amplifying the energy circulating within his body. Clad in this extravagant, borderline ridiculous outfit, Seer made his way to the train station after asking for directions. He soon boarded a train bound for Banato Port. The station was clean and modern, bustling with passengers. "Let's see. My seat is here." After checking his ticket, Seer located his assigned seat and sat down. The seat was modest and not particularly comfortable. Around him, passengers talked noisily. He sighed softly and closed his eyes, attempting to block out the racket. He should have asked the hotel to book him a spot in the luxury compartment, even if it cost more. The life energy of those nearby was within the norm, average, unremarkable. However, in the luxury section ahead, there were a few individuals whose aura was noticeably stronger than the rest. Meanwhile, The Wheel of Fortune card, still unused, began its 3-minute countdown. Seer casually tossed it toward a random man nearby and crossed his arms, watching with curiosity. To his left, a group of 5 men seemed to be traveling together. They acted like they owned the place, drinking openly and boasting loudly. Their conversation ranged from sleeping with others' wives to bragging about forcing themselves on strong-willed women, as well as shady financial schemes. Disgusting, but not uncommon. Then, one of them noticed the white-haired boy sitting nearby. Seer's striking outfit and the dark facial markings had already drawn some attention when he boarded. Now, his bright azure eyes were fixed on their group, or rather, on one specific individual. "Hey, that weird kid is staring at you," one man whispered stiffly, trying to laugh it off but failing. Under that gaze, he couldn't seem to force another smile. Those eyes, so beautiful yet utterly calm and cold, radiated a quiet authority that put him on edge. "Huh? Weird kid? Who's staring?" The man replied, confused. Just as he turned to look. Wham! He smacked straight into a passing stewardess carrying a teapot. Scalding liquid splashed down his shirt. "Ah!" The stewardess yelped in panic, having lost her balance as the man bumped into her. "Hot! Hot!" The man shrieked as he jumped to his feet, flailing in pain. Without hesitation, he ran toward the restroom, desperate to cool the burns. But before he could reach it, his foot slipped on something round and slick. A banana peel. The man's body shot into the air and landed with a bang several meters away, slamming into the door of the next train car. PFFT. Watching the entire spectacle, Seer let out a soft, malicious laugh. So that was the reversed Wheel of Fortune, bad luck incarnate. If the reversed version brought misfortune, then the upright Wheel of Fortune should bring luck. But both luck and misfortune were abstract, unstable forces, difficult to define, impossible to control. The card might well be the most unpredictable one in his deck. "What are you laughing at? Are you mocking our brother?" Hearing Seer's laughter, the man's companions rushed over to help him and immediately turned on the boy. Their expressions twisted in fury. The surrounding passengers wisely kept their distance, unwilling to get involved. In this world, people knew better than to interfere in dangerous affairs. "So what if I am?" Seer said coolly, a faint smile playing on his lips. His tone was dismissive, as though he were talking to ants. "What are you gonna do about it? You little..." The men bristled, their fists clenched and muscles taut with fury. Silence. Seer's voice cut through the noise, calm but powerful, as he idly twirled the scepter granted by the Emperor card. The entire train car fell eerily quiet. Not just the group of men, everyone had gone completely still, their voices caught in their throats. "Kneel." Seer's eyes swept over the group as he spoke. His tone was casual, even curious, like a child testing the function of a new toy. He lightly tapped the floor with the scepter. If his guess was right, the Emperor card should be capable of enforcing obedience. The men's expressions shifted from rage to pure horror as their bodies froze, then moved against their will. With audible creaks and groans, their knees buckled. One by one, they collapsed onto the floor, kneeling before Seer. So, the card really could compel absolute obedience. Interesting. Seer held the Emperor and World cards delicately between his fingers, an amused grin tugging at his lips. Chapter 28. Our bodies. We can't move at all. The men kneeling on the floor widened their bloodshot eyes, their stiff limbs refusing to obey even the most basic commands. They couldn't lift their heads, couldn't twitch a finger. Submissive. Reverent. All they could do was stare blankly at the carpet below them, watching their own sweat drip down, forming dark blotches on the fabric. This is bad. This guy. Why? Why did he target us? A monster with this kind of power. Why would he come after us? Their frantic thoughts screamed internally, but none dared voice them aloud. They were trapped, each man left to wrestle alone with his own fear and helplessness. The train compartment Seer occupied had become the quietest car on the entire train. No one dared speak. Passengers resorted to hand gestures, occasionally sneaking wary glances at the kneeling men in the corner. The train attendants were completely at a loss. Several tried to help the men stand, but no matter how hard they pulled or encouraged them, the bodies wouldn't budge. The sweat-covered faces silently pleaded for help, but the muscles refused to move. After taking a few steadying breaths, the attendants reluctantly approached Seer to plead on the men's behalf. "He's just a young boy. Surely some polite words will work," they thought. But as they drew near, Seer lifted his gaze. His light blue eyes met theirs. That single glance was enough. There was no need for words. The sheer pressure in that gaze weighed on them like a physical force, stifling breath, compressing their chests. "Step back." Though the message wasn't spoken, the intent was unmistakably clear. The attendants felt their bodies react as if compelled, retreating stiffly and involuntarily from the car. The silence deepened. Some passengers even covered their noses, afraid that their breathing might draw attention. Seer, meanwhile, remained entirely focused on testing his card abilities, paying no mind to the people around him. After some careful experimentation, Seer discovered the effects granted by the Emperor and World cards. The upright Emperor card enhanced his control-type abilities while radiating an invisible but tangible aura of dominance. From what he could tell, this aura functioned similarly to what other universes might call Conqueror's Haki, an overwhelming pressure that intimidated and suppressed opposition. When he said silence, the entire car obeyed. When he said kneel, they fell to their knees without resistance. It was a clear, absolute form of control. However, he suspected the ability had its limits. Against someone whose aura or Nen capacity far outclassed his own, the effect might be resisted or weakened, perhaps even rendered null entirely. Interestingly, the Emperor's power didn't just work outwardly, it helped Seer exert finer control over himself as well. While under its effect, his perception of Nen became more refined. This growing clarity allowed him to uncover something new. The more cards he drew and used, the more detailed the descriptions of their effects became. As if in response to his evolving understanding, shimmering words began to appear on the backs of the cards he currently held. Upright Emperor, buff card. Effect 1, Mastery. Upright World, buff card. Effect, Endless Renewal. Endless Renewal? Seer repeated quietly, tasting the phrase as he rolled it over in his mind. Closing his eyes, he turned his senses inward, observing the flow of energy within his body. Come to think of it, his Nen and cursed energy had indeed been regenerating steadily ever since the World card had activated. Considering the effect lasted 24 hours, this was a powerful support ability, providing constant energy recovery for a full day. If he happened to draw this card during a prolonged battle, it would be a complete game changer. He could drain his opponent through sheer endurance, maintaining pressure indefinitely. The only catch? The random nature of the draw. There was no guarantee he'd pull the World card when he needed it most. Still, after fully grasping the potential of the cards he'd drawn today, Seer was in an exceptionally good mood, especially after realizing how useful the World card could be in attrition-based fights. Now approaching Banato City. Passengers disembarking, please prepare to exit, came the sweet, mechanical voice from the train's intercom system. Seer rose, cheerful and refreshed, and made his way to the exit. As he passed the kneeling figures near the car door, he didn't spare them so much as a glance. The entire compartment held its collective breath, praying silently for him to leave. But just as his foot was about to cross the threshold, he paused. He stepped back and stood quietly by the door, half-turned. "You can talk now," he said casually, as if only just remembering he'd silenced them. His gaze flicked toward the men still locked in a kneeling position. "And you all, stand up," he added, his tone light, almost benevolent. The invisible pressure that had bound them vanished instantly. The men collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air like fish on dry land. "The smarter a person is," Seer said softly, with a chilling smile, "the more they understand the value of silence. Don't you agree?" Everyone nodded frantically, too terrified to respond aloud. Satisfied, Seer turned and walked off the train. As his silhouette disappeared from sight, the entire compartment seemed to exhale at once. Yet, no one said a word. Pale-faced and shaken, they simply sat in their seats, staring into space. We survived. Yeah. We actually made it out alive. From the hands of a monster. The men who had been kneeling murmured to each other, voices hoarse and disbelieving as they lay slumped on the ground. Banato City was a coastal metropolis located on the European continent. Though it wasn't especially glamorous in appearance, it stood out thanks to its booming economy, driven by the famous Banato port, a key hub of maritime trade across multiple regions. Being a port city, much of its cuisine came from the sea. Seer bought a few skewers of grilled fish from a street vendor and munched on them as he walked. He loved seafood, but he was allergic to it. Then again, the current Seer wasn't the same as before. He had Nen now. His body was stronger. Enhanced. That was what he told himself. Until red welts bloomed across the back of his hand. His expression darkened as he stared at the reaction. Somehow, the skewer in his hand suddenly felt heavier. "I traveled to another world. Gained powers. And I'm still allergic to seafood?" he muttered, incredulous. After a brief 3-second pause, he resumed eating. "Whatever. It's just an allergy. I won't die." Of course, he'd still need to swing by a pharmacy later. "Hey, what are the ways to get to the Asian continent from Banato Port?" Seer asked a passerby casually. The man he stopped was elderly, dressed in a tank top, sandals, and a straw hat. He waved a hand fan lazily as he replied, "This is a port city. Most common way. Ship, of course. We've got regular departures for Asian every month." "What about other ways?" Seer pressed. "Well, airships, obviously." The old man gave him a look, equal parts puzzled and amused. "Where'd a kid like you come from, huh? So just ships and airships?" Seer asked again, wanting to confirm. "Yup. European and Asian are separated by sea. There's no land route between them. If it ain't by sea, it's by air." "Thanks," Seer nodded and continued walking. That narrowed it down. Sea, land, and air. With land out of the equation, it was just ships or airships. Now the real question, which one to take? Chapter 29. It's December 30th now. I need to catch transportation to the Asian continent before January 1st. The official exam's on January 7th, and I'll need time to locate the venue once I get there, Seer muttered to himself. So the journey itself can't take more than 5 days. Between ships and airships, which one's faster? The white-haired, blue-eyed boy strolled into the central plaza, taking a seat along the edge of a large fountain. Tilting his head back, he watched as seagulls glided overhead. The gray and white birds streaked through the sky like ghostly trails scattered across the clouds. They seem pretty fast, Seer mused. He'd never traveled by ship or airship in this world. Ships weren't particularly new to him, but airships. Back when he'd first watched the anime, he'd always dreamed of riding one. He even attempted to build one himself, something close to a remote-controlled airship model. It had turned out all right, but the project never went any further. Building a full-scale airship was prohibitively expensive. It wasn't a mass-market item, and every component required custom fabrication, driving up the cost. Even though he'd never lacked money as a kid, something like that was still out of reach. In the end, the prototype ended up collecting dust in a glass cabinet, never to fly again. Probably airships, Seer concluded, tossing his empty skewer into a nearby trash bin. But his attention shifted to the swelling on his arm. The red patch had expanded, the allergic reaction clearly worsening. "Pharmacy," he muttered. "Pretty sure I saw one earlier." Calm and expressionless, he stood and walked in the direction of the shop he remembered. What would allergy meds be called in this world? Hopefully something like abostine, loratadine, or even Avastin still exists. He muttered, scratching his chin. The pharmacy sat tucked away in a corner at the far end of the street. The storefront was narrow, the interior dimly lit, and the door small and low enough to be easily missed. It looked like something out of a fantasy story, a shop for dwarves. Not the tiny ones, either, more like the stout, 1.6-meter variety from Snow White. What caught Seer's eye was a symbol etched faintly into the door, a diamond framed by two overlapping X's. The mark of a hunter license. Activating 6 eyes, Seer immediately sensed the presence of someone inside, someone with nen far stronger than any ordinary person. Without hesitation, he pushed open the door and stepped inside. The first thing he saw was a cloaked figure standing before a steaming cauldron. Dressed in black from head to toe, the person gestured rhythmically, as though performing some ancient ritual. Inside the cauldron, a thick, dark purple liquid bubbled and smoked, releasing clouds of noxious vapor into the room. The entire setup screamed dark sorcerer preparing poison. "Voldemort?" Seer said aloud, half joking, his voice skeptical. Were there sorcerers in the hunter world? "What's that? A new kind of nen beast?" the cloaked figure asked, voice slow and drained of vitality. He turned slightly, revealing a face mostly hidden beneath the oversized hood. What little was visible looked corpse-like, ashen skin, lips nearly gray. Perfect, Seer thought. All he's missing is the bald head and snake nose. Then he noticed a long black braid trailing from under the hood, adding a touch of ambiguity to the person's gender. "Something like that," Seer replied smoothly, answering the earlier question. "Never seen one before. Wonder if it's got any rare parts useful for medicine," the figure muttered darkly, sounding more curious than concerned. "Welcome, customer. What kind of medicine do you need?" he added a moment later, finally remembering to greet his visitor, though his tone remained somber and heavy. "I'm allergic to seafood. Got anything for that?" Seer asked, his curiosity piqued by both the shop and its strange owner, who looked like an NPC in an RPG. And everyone knows mysterious NPCs always trigger side quests. "Food allergy, is it? That's minor." The so-called dark wizard extinguished the fire beneath the cauldron, letting the thick brew settle as he stepped forward. Grabbing Seer's arm without warning, the shopkeeper lifted it and stared at the red swelling for a few seconds before letting go. Seer flinched slightly at the touch. He instinctively wanted to trigger Ren to cleanse the contact but restrained himself. "That'll be 10,000 Jenny," the cloaked man said, turning toward a cluttered shelf. In this world, Jenny had roughly the same value as yen, so that was about $60. Pretty steep for allergy meds. Sensing hesitation, the cloaked man added slowly, "All ingredients are sourced from magical plants. Completely genuine. High quality. You're not a regular customer. You understand the value," he continued, having clearly sensed Seer's aura the moment he entered. The boy hadn't concealed his presence at all, his nen radiating effortlessly. There was no mistaking it, the seemingly youthful figure was far stronger than he looked. "1 dose, please," Seer said calmly, neither confirming nor denying the man's guess. As he handed over the cash, his eyes wandered across the shop. The shelves were built from aged wood and packed with bizarre items, curved animal horns, jars of coarse black soil, gelatinous white masses, and faintly glowing powders. Some jars even held what looked like preserved fruits and vegetables. All from Nen flora and fauna, huh? Seer remarked, pointing at a plump red strawberry displayed in one glass case. It looked perfectly normal, vibrant, ripe, and mouth-watering. That's a strawberry grown on the backs of strawberry tortoises in the Milsey wetlands. Sweet and mild in nature, it strengthens the body. Commonly added to medicine to enhance flavor, the cloaked man explained with dry seriousness. Seer smirked. So basically, strawberry-flavored meds. What about that? He asked, pointing to a softly glowing red powder. Its luminescent shimmer made it look almost magical in the dim lighting. Scales from blood-sucking butterflies. Excellent for restoring depleted energy. Often used in special medicines. Special? Seer raised an eyebrow. Meds used by adults. Nighttime activities. The man's tone remained flat. Also useful in certain darker applications. Blood-sucking butterfly scales are essential in some sedatives. Interesting, Seer nodded, clearly intrigued. Considering how often he bled from the nose during training or fights, something to replenish stamina wasn't a bad idea. Chapter 30. Do you have any medicine for blood replenishment? Seer asked casually. Blood replenishment? You need that kind of medicine? The gloomy shopkeeper replied, his movements stiff and mechanical, like an old machine in need of oil. He slowly lifted his head, and the oversized hood slid back slightly, revealing the upper half of his face. Unfortunately, he wasn't the noseless Voldemort Seer had half expected. Instead, his features were surprisingly decent. A melancholic, mysterious sort of look, one that might appeal to a certain demographic. The shopkeeper stared at the white-haired boy with lifeless, pitch-black eyes for a long moment before slowly lowering his gaze again. You do seem like you need it. By the way, interested in something to help relax your mind? He asked, picking up a small calculator. Relax my mind? You don't mean something illegal, right? Seer's voice was skeptical. He was thinking of drugs, the kind that sent people into hazy, euphoric stupors. If it was that kind of thing, should he report this guy to the Hunter Association? Whatever you're imagining, my shop doesn't sell illegal substances, the man replied dully. It's just incense. Promotes restful sleep. His tone was flat, utterly neutral, without inflection. It felt like even his emotions had been set to grayscale. I'll take it, Seer replied thoughtfully. But just as he spoke, his head turned sharply toward the door. Through 6 eyes, he sensed a strong life force approaching, one even greater than the shopkeeper's. 3, 2, 1. Bang. The door slammed open, rattling the shelves. A large figure stood in the entrance. Jordan. What's the task this time? The man froze when his eyes landed on Seer. The total is 13,770 Jenny, the shopkeeper, now identified as Jordan, said as he keyed numbers into his calculator. Materials from Nen beasts are more expensive due to their rarity and harvesting difficulty, he added, preemptively justifying the high price tag. Seer's eye twitched. Getting medicine in this world wasn't cheap. Apparently, staying healthy was just as expensive here as in his old life. Fine, he muttered, removing his backpack and signaling for Jordan to pack the goods inside. With the transaction complete, Jordan finally turned to address the new arrival. The man was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and a grin full of gleaming white teeth. Do you need something? Jordan asked. Even with someone he clearly knew, his voice remained flat and monotone. I'm here to submit a task. These are the materials you wanted. Spent a whole month in the Nen Beast Forest collecting them. The man said, dropping a large sack onto the counter. Then, turning to Seer, he gave a thumbs up. Jordan's medicines are famous for being worth every Jenny. Seer ignored him. He took the newly packed backpack and slung it over his shoulder. Despite Jordan's dreary demeanor, the bottles were neatly labeled with dosage instructions. He pulled out the bottle for his seafood allergy and downed 2 pills. Strawberry flavored, of course, thanks to the strawberry tortoise fruit. Understood. Thank you for your work, Jordan said after glancing into the sack and placing it behind the counter. Then he stared silently at the man, prompting him to state his actual reason for being there. Well. The man scratched his head awkwardly. Someone back home's got a fever. I need medicine for that. Also, give me some of that incense you mentioned, and the usual insect repellent. Pack it all up. Oh, and strawberry flavored, please. Ah, so that's what the hunter license emblem on the door was for. This place catered to hunters and their families. Even if hunters themselves rarely needed healing, their loved ones often did. These were the shop's target customers. And judging by the earlier conversation, the store also assigned gathering tasks to hunters for rare medicinal ingredients. It really did feel like an RPG NPC hub. Seer quietly observed. After the man left, he turned to Jordan. Do you have any tasks? He asked directly. Jordan stared at him for a moment, then replied slowly, Do you have a hunter license? Seer remained silent. Jordan understood instantly. Come back after you've obtained one. I only assign tasks to licensed hunters. So, some tasks came with prerequisites. Well, whatever. By the time he earned his license, he'd probably lose interest in basic fetch quests anyway. There were too many exciting places to explore. Having failed to get a task, Seer hoisted his bag and walked out. Do visit again. Jordan called out in his usual lifeless tone, his voice trailing like a slow-burning candle. The anti-allergy medicine came in pill form. The blood-replenishing medicine was packaged in powdered sachets to brew as tea, and the incense was a solid, black cube. Seer found a cup and brewed 2 packs of the powdered tonic at once. No more worrying about nosebleeds turning into anemia, he said aloud, sitting near the docks and sipping the hot liquid. The swelling on his arm faded rapidly, the allergic reaction vanishing within minutes. And he still had a full bottle of anti-allergy pills left. No more letting seafood allergies ruin my appetite, he grinned. As long as he could take the medicine fast enough, it wouldn't be a problem. For the next couple of days, I'll just relax, he murmured, packing away the cup and heading toward an inn. The inns near the port were small and modest, while the more luxurious hotels were farther from the coastline. Still, the port district had a charm of its own, bustling crowds, street vendors, fresh-caught food, and occasional public events. Like the food challenge Seer stumbled upon next. He stopped in his tracks, eyes locking onto a signboard, then scanning the crowd gathered around the shop. Judging from the number of customers, the food here must be decent. Don't miss your chance. Enter our food challenge, finish everything in 30 minutes and get a month of free meals. Fail, and you pay full price, shouted the restaurant owner, dressed in a white apron and speaking through a megaphone. A crowd had formed to watch, but every challenger so far had failed spectacularly. Count me in, Seer said, raising his hand. A kid? What's he gonna eat, a rice ball? This is just free money for the owner. He better quit now, his parents'll scold him for wasting money. Ha ha. The crowd chuckled, half teasing, half good-natured. Without changing expression, Seer, still dressed in his regal, emperor card attire, sat at the table. 30 minutes later. The shop owner, pale and reluctant, raised the megaphone again. Congratulations to this young man for clearing the challenge. You've earned a month of free meals. Finally full, Seer sighed in satisfaction, patting his stomach. Ever since arriving in this world, his appetite had been growing steadily. But now, after this binge, he finally understood just how much he could eat. 50 full portions, and his stomach still looked flat. He was officially a bottomless pit. Chapter 31. January 1st, 6 a.m. The dock was already bustling with activity. Vendors had begun setting up their stalls, white smoke curling into the air, mingling with a chorus of shouting hawkers and clattering crates. Unsurprisingly, the dominant scent was a heavy, pungent fishiness. Over 80% of the vendors were selling seafood, every type imaginable. Amid the lively chaos, Seer calmly swallowed a few anti-allergy pills before digging into a seafood breakfast with enthusiasm. At that moment, he found himself envying Sukuna's second mouth, the grotesque one that could move independently and even grow on the stomach. Being able to eat with two mouths at once would definitely improve efficiency. He instinctively touched his abdomen. It was odd. Before attending that last cosplay event, he painted 2 extra pairs of eyes on his face and a wide mouth on his stomach. But after transmigrating into this world, they had all vanished without a trace. In hindsight, he was glad. Walking around with 4 eyes on his face would have gotten him treated like an actual monster. Once full and satisfied, Seer began searching for the airship. The boats were all docked near the pier, but airships had designated landing zones farther inland. Finding the location wasn't difficult, any random passerby could point him in the right direction. The real issue was, the airships were parked in neat rows across a large open field. They all looked nearly identical, massive hulls, streamlined shapes, polished exteriors. The only way to distinguish them was by serial number. And there were over 10 different flights heading to the Asian continent alone. Seer had no clue which one was the right one for the hunter exam. The only detail he'd been given was Asian continent. No time. No gate. No ship ID. So this is part of the test too. What a hassle, he muttered, scratching his head. His fingers brushed against longer strands than he remembered. The hair, originally a wig, had become real after he transmigrated, and it had continued to grow since. Maybe I'll just track the person with the highest Nen level nearby, he whispered, tightening the straps on his backpack. Anyone affiliated with the hunter exam would likely have far stronger aura than ordinary civilians. Focusing through 6 eyes, he scanned the area, filtering through the surrounding auras. The most powerful individuals would stand out instantly, like flares in a sea of shadows. 1 hour later, Seer sat by the roadside, pinching his nose with tissue paper and sipping blood-replenishing tea from a thermos. Using 6 eyes had revealed several ability users nearby. Most had average aura levels, but a few stood out, significantly stronger than the rest. I'll start with those, he murmured, heading toward the nearest blip on his internal radar. His first stop was a shady-looking building tucked into a side street. No signage. No guards. Just a blacked-out door. He stepped inside. The sunlight vanished behind him, replaced by dim shadows and the heavy air of stale alcohol. The entire room was quiet, too quiet. Its inhabitants appeared to be passed out cold from a night of partying. Men and women alike were slumped across couches, tables, and the floor. The person with the strongest aura, according to 6 eyes, was a man. He sat in the center of the room, shirtless, with a loose belt and lipstick smeared across his scarred chest. His head hung low, arms wrapped lazily around 2 barely clothed women. He looked like a lion passed out after a long feast. For a child, the scene might have been jarring. Seer barely blinked. He stepped closer. Suddenly, the man's head jerked up, eyes sharp and amber. No trace of sleep remained. His gaze locked on Seer. Then, as he took in the boy's small frame and striking features, his tensed body slowly relaxed. "This isn't a place for kids," the man groaned, rubbing his temples. Scram. Unfazed, Seer remained where he stood. "Are you a hunter exam proctor?" The man blinked. Hunter exam? He hadn't thought about that in years. Nope. Don't have time for that. Can't you see I'm busy? He gestured lazily at the women at his sides. Busy drinking and debauchery, huh? Seer said nothing. He turned and walked out. If he wasn't the proctor, he wasn't worth the time. The second aura source led him to a chef, someone clearly skilled in the culinary arts, especially the preparation of Nen beast cuisine. A likely gourmet hunter, the man owned a renowned restaurant at the heart of Banato City, surrounded by upscale malls and towering landmarks. When Seer found him, he was mid-prep, blending cooking and Nen manipulation in elegant harmony. The chef didn't even look up when Seer asked about the exam. No info on that, he said bluntly. The third person was a woman, long black curls, pale skin, a curvaceous figure, and the aura of someone both confident and dangerous. When Seer appeared before her, she didn't seem surprised. I'll answer your questions. But only if you agree to wear a dress for me, she said with a faint smile. Snip. The scream that followed, echoing through half of Banato, came as Seer sliced off half of her hair without hesitation. By the time he reached his final target, Seer's expression had lost all trace of amusement. You're the hunter exam proctor, aren't you? He asked flatly, his voice low, his tone very done. This better be the guy. If not, Seer was going to punch someone. The man, standing nearby with a perfectly pressed suit and slicked back hair, looked startled. How did you find me? He asked, genuinely baffled. He looked like a business executive, not someone involved in secretive exams. So you're not, Seer muttered, fist clenching. Wait, don't get mad. The man raised both hands quickly. Peace. I'm not a proctor, but I do know a little about the exam, he added with a sly grin. Seer didn't look impressed, but he loosened his fist. Did you use an ability on me? He asked suddenly. Something that suppresses hostility or killing intent. The man blinked, then smiled. How interesting, Seer murmured. He gave a faint smile, one that hinted at curiosity, but not kindness. Go on, he said. My motto is, no info comes free, the man replied smoothly. Ask your question, and I'll quote you a price depending on the intel's value. Which airship takes examinees to the hunter exam? Seer asked flatly. The man blinked, as if disappointed by how simple the question was. That's all you want to know? Seer nodded. The Hunter Association's airships don't dock here. They run on exclusive private routes, the man explained. It's common knowledge among licensed hunters and insiders. So, I won't charge for it, he added with a theatrical sigh. Clearly, he was upset that this valuable-looking customer only needed basic information. So that was why Seer couldn't locate the correct ship, because the association's vessels weren't part of the public lineup. Typical. Hunter privileges. Seer narrowed his eyes, lips pressed into a cold line. Chapter 32. If you've already registered for the hunter exam online, just give your name to the receptionist at the front desk, and someone will guide you. Following the enthusiastic instructions of the self-proclaimed information broker, Seer returned to the area where the large fleet of airships was stationed. This time, he entered through the main gate, walking confidently into the reception hall. He approached the front desk and provided his information for the exam. Seer DeVille. Check my flight. The receptionist's fingers flew across the keyboard. After a moment, she offered him a polished, professional smile. Please head this way. She raised her hand and pointed to a corridor. Despite the crowd, the area she indicated was roped off, quiet, closed off, and completely devoid of people. The contrast was striking, clearly separate from the bustling lobby and general boarding areas. Was it really this simple? Had he overthought things? Seer pushed the door open and stepped inside. Instantly, several sharp, evaluating gazes locked onto him, filled with guarded curiosity. No one moved. The air was thick with tension. "What's wrong? Want to fight already?" Seer said with a smirk, sweeping a contemptuous glance across the others. His voice was casual, but his tone was sharp, openly provocative. One by one, the others averted their eyes, ignoring him in silence. Everyone kept their distance, maintaining a cautious stalemate. Each person looked dangerous. Many wore weapons openly. Most exuded the air of seasoned fighters, likely masters of close combat or specialized martial arts. But amidst the aura of danger and criminal energy stood one out-of-place figure. In the corner, a blond boy with a pageboy haircut clutched his backpack, huddled in silence like a hostage brought against his will. Compared to the others, who resembled hardened killers, the blond boy looked like a lost school kid. Was he really a candidate? From what Seer could see with 6 eyes, none of them were particularly strong. But even among this group, the blond boy's aura was the weakest by far. He practically had easy target written on his forehead. Then again, appearances were often misleading in this world. The weakest sometimes bit the hardest. Seer plopped onto a nearby sofa and glanced casually around the room. There was a soft carpet underfoot, shiny leather couches perfect for lounging, an oversized golden clock hanging on the wall, and antique-filled bookshelves lining the back. Most important of all, free snacks. Seer unzipped his bag and checked his remaining rations. His appetite had ballooned recently, and the supplies Sid had packed for him were long gone. Without hesitation, he began stuffing snacks from the table into his backpack. He prioritized high-calorie and sugary items, especially chocolate balls. If his bag had been bigger, he might have taken everything. The other examinees stared in silence. None of them had dared touch the snacks before. But once Seer started helping himself, no one tried to stop him. After filling his bag, he leaned back into the sofa and began munching slowly on whatever he couldn't pack. Then came the announcement. "Attention, candidates. The airship has arrived. Please board within 10 minutes. Latecomers will bear the consequences. Attention, candidates. Attention, candidates." The speaker blared 3 times from a corner of the room. But by the time the first message ended, nearly everyone had bolted out of the lounge, practically stampeding toward the exit. Clearly, the announcements couldn't be heard from outside, designed to reach only those already inside the waiting room. Seer stayed put until the 3rd message finished. Who knew? Maybe the first message was a trap to make people panic, while the final one revealed the important details. It wouldn't be the first time the Hunter Association pulled something like that. Only then did he casually exit the room. It didn't take long for him to catch up to the others who had rushed ahead. Soon after, he spotted it, a massive red and white airship descending slowly from the sky, the unmistakable symbol of the Hunter Association emblazoned on its side. As the ship landed, its doors opened with a low mechanical hum. Even before they were fully open, the crowd surged forward, eager to board. Seer followed behind and stepped inside, finally seeing in person what he'd once only watched on a screen. The interior was stunning. A transparent glass corridor offered panoramic views of the world below. There was a gourmet restaurant with personal service, a bar stocked with rare wines, a training hall, and an entertainment lounge, all available on board. It was even more luxurious than the private jets he used to ride back on Earth. Slower, maybe, but far more extravagant. Clap, clap. A pair of loud claps drew everyone's attention. 2 men stood at the front of the corridor. The one who had clapped was tall, around 1.8 meters, with a lean build, pale skin, and long-sleeved attire. He had the air of a calm, professional instructor. "Welcome, everyone, to the 286th Hunter exam," the man said, voice polite and composed. "I'm your examiner for this year, Bindo." He gestured to the shorter figure beside him. And this is Rojef. Rojef was barely 1.7 meters tall. His skin had a pale green hue, and he wore matching green clothes. He looked more like a sentient plant than a person. He simply gave a curt nod to the group, clearly not fond of speaking. The airship will take 6 days to reach the Asian continent, so you'll all be spending that time on board, Bindo continued. There's a restaurant, lounge, training room, and entertainment room, all of it free to use. He emphasized the last part, likely because prior candidates had asked if there was a fee. Please get along. If you must fight, do so in the training room. And while everything is free, damaging the facilities will cost you, Bindo added with a faint smile, clearly referencing past exam incidents. Seer yawned. Blah blah blah. Rules. Got it. That's all. Dismissed, Bindo finished. He clapped his hands once more and vanished instantly. Rojef nodded again, then slipped into the shadows and disappeared as well. With the examiners gone, the candidates scattered, some heading to the restaurant, others to the training hall, and some to the entertainment room. Seer followed suit. Let's see what the entertainment room looks like, he muttered. But before he could get far, the blond boy with the pageboy haircut from earlier suddenly approached him. How old are you? What's your name? The boy asked timidly. You look so young. And already so strong, he added, eyes wide with admiration. Seer didn't reply, but internally. Of course you think that. You didn't cheat. I did. A second chance, a system, stat boosts, an entire skill set handed to him, how could he not be strong? He smirked to himself. Yeah. I know. I'm a walking cheat code. Short pause time. Apparently, if I don't talk here, the AI overlords get cranky. So hi YouTube algorithm, we love transformation. Okay, back to the story. Chapter 33. Will he tell me his name? Will he even talk to me? With that kind of strength at his age. He must think someone like me isn't even worth noticing. The blond boy with the pageboy haircut clenched his fists tightly behind his back, his fingernails digging deep into his palms. Despite this, his face remained composed, shy, cautious, yet clearly trying not to show his nerves. He was watching the white-haired, blue-eyed boy standing before him. There was something magnetic about the contrast in the other boy, both distant and sharp. You couldn't help but notice him. Before asking someone's name, you should give yours first. The white-haired boy raised an eyebrow, the dark markings across his face shifting subtly with the motion. His gaze was cold, not hostile or approving. Just cold. An indifferent, impartial coldness that somehow put people on edge. Or at ease. My name is Malo, from York New City, the blond boy introduced himself, blushing as he spoke. What the hell? Is he blushing like a kettle about to boil? Seer averted his gaze to avoid the awkwardness, staring instead at the clouds outside the airship's glass corridor. Yorknew, huh? Got it, Marrow, Seer replied with a light nod, before immediately realizing his mistake. Oops. Got the name wrong. Oh well. He's too weak to care. Yorknew, now that was a familiar name. Infamous for its underground auctions, rampant black market activity, and the heavy hand of the mafia. How did a fragile mouse like him survive in a place like that? You still haven't told me your name, Malo asked again, a little more timidly. Seer, the white-haired boy said at last, giving his alias. Got it. Seer. Can I stick with you? Malo's face lit up immediately, filled with hope and admiration. Seriously? All I gave was a fake name. Why are weaklings like this? Internally rolling his eyes, Seer answered flatly, no. He had zero interest in babysitting anyone, especially someone who'd just slow him down. I just mean while we're on the airship. Malo rushed to explain. Once we land, you don't have to worry about me, even if I'm in danger. I swear I won't cause any trouble. Please, just let me follow you for now." Seer's face remained blank. "Enough." His expression turned cold as he cut Malo off. "Don't follow me." Then, he vanished. One blink, and he was gone. Rejected, Malo murmured to himself, staring at the empty space Seer had occupied. His shoulders slumped. As expected. No one wants to be friends with someone as weak as me. Blood dripped from his clenched fists onto the transparent floor. Alarmed, he crouched down and wiped it away quickly, panicked, as if terrified someone would notice. Seer, having successfully shaken off Malo, found a vacant private cabin on board. The room was simple but comfortable. A single bed, about 1.8 by 2 meters, a private bathroom, and basic furnishings. Nothing fancy, but far better than the average inn. He dropped his backpack onto the bed and tore off a scrap of paper. After scribbling a short message, he stuck it to the door. No entry without permission. Satisfied, he turned and headed for the entertainment room. By the time Seer arrived, several people were already inside. Some were lounging at the bar, sipping drinks. Others were huddled around a table, locked in a heated card game. "You lost again? Man, your luck's in the toilet lately. Bad luck during the hunter exam? Might as well write your will now." One of the men sneered, tossing a winning hand onto the table. Another slammed a fist down in frustration, then, without warning, drew a knife and pressed it to the winner's throat. "If you kill me now, you'll be disqualified on the spot," the winner said calmly, continuing to shuffle the deck like nothing had happened. "Let's see if your luck holds out till the final stage," the knife wielder muttered, pulling back his weapon and flopping into his seat. Seer watched with mild interest as he sank into a corner sofa. The cushions were so soft they almost swallowed him whole. "So, examinees can't kill each other, huh?" he mused aloud. "But I distinctly remember Hisoka killing people during the exam. And he still passed. So the rule wasn't really no killing, it was no getting caught. Figures. It's the hunter exam. Survival of the sneakiest. Anyone up for cards?" Seer asked lazily, raising a hand. No one looked his way. Typical. Like a bunch of criminals are gonna play with a kid. "Fine. Anyone heading to the training room? I'm available for sparring," he offered, tone deliberately casual. This time, someone looked up. "Of course. Fighters are way more common here. This is the hunter exam, after all." "You serious, kid? You don't look like you can throw a punch," said a massive man, muscle straining against a sleeveless shirt that looked one size too small. His biceps were nearly the size of Seer's head. "Hilarious. Not a single one of you is even close to Sid's level. This is gonna be sad." "Why not find out?" Seer replied, voice light, almost bored. He didn't even bother standing up. "Humph. Fine then, let's go," the man grunted, stomping toward the exit. Seer yawned and followed him. Several other examinees followed, eager to see what promised to be an amusing mismatch. Despite the airship's enormous size, the space allocated to examinees was limited. After carving out room for lounges, dining halls, resting quarters, medical bays, and restricting areas for exam staff and licensed hunters, the training room was one of the few shared zones. It was decently large, able to accommodate dozens of fighters at once. When Seer's group arrived, the room was already in use. The muffled thud-thud of fists meeting flesh echoed through the training hall as they opened the door, soundproofing at its finest. Inside were sandbags, training mats, wooden dummies, free weights, plenty of tools for both physical conditioning and combat practice. In one corner, Seer spotted Malo, currently serving as someone's personal punching bag. He wasn't sparring. He wasn't fighting back. He was just being beaten. Despite having similar aura levels to his opponent, he was being completely overwhelmed, pinned and pummeled like he couldn't land a single counter. Yeah. Marrow suits him better. Take a good look, kid, the burly man said, smirking as he gestured to Malo's beatdown. That's probably your future. Oh, really? Seer replied with a sly grin, his blue eyes glinting mischievously. The grin had an eerie, ghost-like sharpness to it. The burly man paused, just for a second. Chapter 34. Before the match began, Seer took a moment to examine the training room's walls. He pressed his fingers against the surface and applied some force. No dents, no marks. Good. At least I won't accidentally punch through the airship. He flexed his fingers. Maybe I'll hit a black flash this time. These guys might just be weak enough for it. The only problem was collateral damage. If he accidentally killed someone here, he could be disqualified. What a pain. Why are they all so fragile? Hey, kid. What are you feeling up the wall for? Get over here. The burly man barked. His biceps looked big enough to qualify for a separate weight class. Seer turned toward him with a faint smile. I'll even let you have the first move, the man offered, pounding his chest with both fists. The dull thud echoed through the room like the beat of a war drum. That meat looks so tough, even Sukuna wouldn't want it. Oh, thanks for the courtesy, Seer said, arching an eyebrow. His tone dripped with mock politeness. A faint swirl of deep blue energy gathered around his hand. Then, he vanished. Crack. A thunderous crash rocked the training room. When the dust cleared, the burly man was embedded in the wall, arms limp, eyes rolled back, body limp. Cracks spiderwebbed out from the point of impact. It would have looked funny if it weren't so quiet. Seer stood exactly where the man had been, casually inspecting his own fist. Well, that was unexpected, he muttered. He looked from his hand to the wall, then to the unconscious man. I finally landed a black flash. And it had to be on him. The irony was almost painful. He had sparred with Sid dozens of times and never once triggered the technique. Now, of all people, it happened against some muscle-bound idiot. Guess I landed a crit by accident. At least the training room walls held up, barely. Seer strolled over and casually yanked the man's body out of the wall like he was removing a loose poster. Hang in there. Don't die just yet, he muttered. Using 6 eyes, Seer could already tell the man's life force was fading fast. If he didn't get treatment in the next 10 minutes, he'd bleed out internally. I swear, I didn't mean to kill him. But who's gonna believe me? He wasn't some bloodthirsty psychopath. But in this crowd? It would sound like a weak excuse. This is annoying, he sighed. Turning toward the rest of the stunned room, he gestured lazily. One of you. Go get an examiner. No one moved. The silence was deafening. Everyone instinctively stepped back, pressing themselves against the far wall like it could somehow protect them. Even those mid-training had stopped completely. A few began inching toward the exit. Seer noticed. He always noticed. Trying to leave? He asked softly. The air grew heavy. A razor-sharp cut suddenly appeared beside one man's face, slashing off a few strands of hair and nicking his cheek. It was impossible to tell if it was a warning or a near-fatal miss. And no. I wasn't trying to run. The man stammered, backing away in a panic. I'm serious. I didn't mean to kill him, Seer said, standing and brushing his hands together. His tone remained flat, but his blue eyes glinted with eerie sharpness. You believe me, don't you? Everyone nodded. Hard. Good, he said, flashing a smile that wasn't remotely reassuring. Now someone go get an examiner. Quickly, before he dies. This time, the man nearest the door bolted out, screaming as he ran. "Examiner! Help! There's a monster in the training room." The burly man now lay limp on the floor, blood trickling from his mouth. Seer sat cross-legged beside him, resting his chin in one palm, bored. The other examinees stayed huddled at the far end of the room, silent as statues. No one dared move. They breathed like prey, small, shallow gasps. Anything louder felt dangerous. In one corner, Malo, face bloodied, watched the scene unfold. His eyes weren't filled with fear. They were full of awe. He's so strong. How had he ever thought he could talk to someone like that? He wasn't worthy. He wasn't even strong enough to be a follower. When examiners Bindo and Rojef arrived, they both stopped short. Even as veteran hunters, the sight before them was odd. A pale, white-haired boy, no older than 13, calmly sitting in the center of a silent, frozen room. Everyone else too afraid to speak. The pressure in the air was suffocating. Bindo stepped forward, and instantly felt it. Aura? No, not just aura. It's like the air itself is bending under the weight of his presence. Seer stood, dusting himself off as if rising from a nap. Then he pointed casually at the injured man on the floor. "He's not dead yet. You should start treating him soon." The moment he spoke, the tension broke like a popped bubble. It was as if the room exhaled for the first time in minutes. Bindo's eyes shifted to the cracked wall, then to the misshapen dent where a man had once stood. He knelt to examine the patient. The injuries were gruesome: shattered ribs, ruptured organs, crushed spine. His body was practically jelly. "These injuries," Bindo muttered. "I'll take over," Rojef said quietly, kneeling beside him. He placed a glowing green hand against the man's chest, a gentle stream of healing energy flowing into his body. Seer watched with interest. His 6 eyes tracked the faint pulsing of Nen, stabilizing what little life force remained. "He won't die right away," Rojef said after a moment. "But he's finished as a participant. His body won't recover in time." Bindo sighed, then turned toward Seer. Their eyes met. Seer's expression was completely calm. Before either examiner could speak, he jerked a thumb toward the corner. "Oh, and take that one too," he added, nodding toward Malo. "Too weak. Just looking at him is annoying." His tone was detached, like a king swatting away unworthy servants. Bindo blinked. Rojef didn't respond. They simply picked up the 2 injured men and carried them toward the medical bay. Seer stayed behind with the other examinees. He looked around, sweeping the room with a lazy, disinterested stare. "So," he muttered. "Who's next?" His voice was quiet, but the effect was immediate. No one spoke. No one looked at him. No one wanted to join the man already hovering between life and death. Seer sighed. "Sid would have loved this. Only been a week since I left Meteor City, and I already miss that bastard." "Well then," he said, stretching his arms overhead. "Anyone want to play cards?" The silence broke immediately. "Me. I'll play." "Back to the lounge, yeah? Cards sound great." The room became a flurry of movement. Everyone seemed to agree, appeasing the monster was better than angering him. They really know how to read the room, Seer thought with faint amusement. 1 hour later. Seer sat at the card table in the lounge, staring at yet another bad hand. His face was unreadable. But internally, maybe the training room wasn't so bad after all. Chapter 35. Entertainment Lounge, Airship. "Not playing anymore," the white-haired, blue-eyed boy muttered, tossing his cards onto the table in frustration. Game after game, Seer hadn't drawn a single decent hand. No pairs, no flushes, nothing but losses. No one was cheating. His luck was just that bad. And since Seer refused to cheat or allow anyone to go easy on him, he hadn't won a single round. The other players didn't know what to do. None of them wanted to beat someone who could punch them through a wall, but his rotten luck made it impossible not to win against him. Seer leaned back into the sofa, expression blank but clearly displeased. The others exchanged nervous glances. Should we head out for now? One asked with a forced, awkward smile. Their attempts at diplomacy were clumsy and painfully obvious. None of them were used to groveling like this. But when a demon wears a child's face, there's not much room for pride. Seer glanced lazily at them, and that was all it took. They scattered like birds under a hawk's shadow. Useless, Seer muttered, propping his chin on one hand and yawning. Boring bunch. Clearly, the examinees aboard this airship were only a small slice of the total. Thousands reportedly registered for the Hunter exam every year, and several hundred usually made it to the starting site. But this airship? Barely a few dozen. Humph. Since when were Hunter exam officials this considerate? In the original timeline, candidates had to pass several pretests just to reach the true exam site. Hell, there was even a shape-shifting beast that impersonated an examiner to weed people out. Yet here, Seer had been escorted by 2 genuine hunters, confirmed by his 6 eyes, both of whom were powerful enough to pass for pro-hunters. So why were they here? Why show up this early? It didn't add up. They must be testing us already, Seer thought, a faint flicker of anticipation in his eyes. There wouldn't be a written notice. This was the Hunter exam, not high school. Which meant the airship itself might be part of the first trial. Come on, examiners. Surprise me. Knock knock. The sound echoed from the lounge door, soft, hesitant. Seer didn't respond. This wasn't some executive office or private quarters. Knocking? Really? After a moment of silence, a timid voice followed. Excuse me. May I come in? That voice. Seer recognized it immediately. It was him. The name was hard to forget. Didn't I just send him to the medical room? He's back already? Come in, Seer said lazily. The door creaked open, and Malo entered, cautious and uneasy, every movement drenched in hesitation. The first thing he saw was the boy sprawled on the sofa, half sunk into the cushions. Seer's frame looked small and weightless against the oversized furniture. Legs crossed, chin in hand, half-lidded eyes barely acknowledging his presence. Even so, those pale blue eyes were impossible to ignore. To Malo, they were the most beautiful eyes he'd ever seen, far more captivating than the legendary scarlet eyes sold at York New auctions. Those red eyes, plucked and sealed in jars, looked grotesque, corrupted by the greed they attracted. Seer's were pure, cold, unreachable. Lord Seer, Malo stammered, his golden hair still matted from earlier bruises. Though his injuries had been treated, his eyes were wide with admiration. I came to thank you. Thank me. Seer repeated, eyebrow raised. The curiosity in his tone was faint but present. You asked the examiners to take me to the medical room, Malo said, his emerald green eyes practically glowing with gratitude. And you were incredible in the training room. His tone was reverent, almost worshipful. Seer gave a small shrug. That's because you're weak. You were just in the way. He stood up and stretched with a casual yawn. There's no shortage of punching bags who can't fight back. Malo stiffened but didn't speak. Then, softly, it's just that. I always feel like I shouldn't fight back. Oh? For the first time, Seer turned to face him properly. Now that he looked closely, this kid wasn't bad looking. Certainly more presentable than the typical rough-edged examinees. A different type. Golden hair, green eyes. From York New City, no less. And his aura. It had been on par with his attackers back in the training room. Yet he didn't fight back. There's something deeper here. Seer could tell. In an RPG, this kid would definitely be an NPC with a hidden backstory, or a trigger for a side quest. Alright, let's hear it, Seer said, sitting back down. If your reason's good enough, maybe I'll teach you a thing or two. Malo hesitated, then spoke slowly, haltingly. I've always been the one getting beaten. When I fought back, more people would gain up on me. If I just took it, they got bored faster. Left sooner. Seer didn't even blink. He'd expected that answer. Calling this guy a wimp would be an insult to wimps. Well, you're pathetic, Seer said bluntly. Flat tone. No anger. Just truth. Hit me. Huh? Malo blinked. Come on, Seer repeated, rising to his feet. Hit me. You must be joking, Malo mumbled, lowering his head. If you can't even strike once, you might as well give up now, Seer said with a shrug. People who only endure and never resist don't survive long in the hunter exam. If he dropped out now, he might live longer. Seer smirked. I really am such a kind and virtuous person. I can do it, Malo whispered. Oh? Seer raised an eyebrow, watching him carefully. As long as it's not you, I can, Malo said, balling his fists. Great. Go to the training room. Pick someone. Throw a punch, Seer said brightly, clapping his hands together. Worst case. He gets beat up again. No one's allowed to kill here anyway. Maybe he'll get a life lesson. Maybe he'll quit. Either way, I'm being very thoughtful. I'll prove it to you, Malo said, eyes burning with determination. He marched out of the lounge, fists clenched, whispering affirmations under his breath. I can do this. Just one punch and run. One punch. It wasn't convincing. Seer didn't care. Guess I'll go back to my room and sleep. He turned away from the lounge without looking back. No expectations. Not for Malo. Not for the exam. Not for anything, really. But the next surprise was never far. Chapter 36. The walls of the training room, still lined with cracks from Seer's earlier impact, now stood as a grim reminder of his overwhelming strength. The space bore the scars of a monster's presence. Damn it! One of the candidates muttered, slamming his fist against the wall, only for it to rebound harmlessly, leaving no mark at all. It only served to emphasize the unbridgeable gap between them and that boy. How the hell are we in the same exam as someone like that, he murmured, collapsing to the floor in defeat. What if we team up and eliminate him first? Someone suggested cautiously. The others turned to look at him. You mean a suicide mission? One said, eyeing the crater in the wall. This is the hunter exam. You can take it again. There's no need to get ourselves killed over one guy. But you only get one life, another added darkly. The group nodded in silent agreement. Fair enough, the man who made the suggestion admitted, sitting down. Strangely, they all sat in quiet understanding, an unexpected sense of camaraderie forming among them. A short while ago, none of them would have believed they'd be able to sit peacefully in the same room. At that moment, the door creaked open, and Malo, the golden-haired boy, stepped inside. Someone smirked. The punching bag's back. Anyone want a warm-up? He's boring. Hard pass. The memory of him lying limp under someone's fists was still fresh. He hadn't even fought back. Training with someone like that wasn't just pointless, it was pathetic. They genuinely wondered how someone like him had even made it this far. But Malo walked to the center of the room, scanning each of them one by one. That slow, steady look caught them off guard. What's with this attitude? They thought. One by one, they began to rise. "What do you want?" someone asked warily. Malo pointed at a man seated near the back. "That one." Then, without warning, he stepped forward, and punched. The strike wasn't fast, but it landed cleanly, snapping the man's head to the side. Silence. A beat later, the man's eyes widened in rage. "You little..." Meanwhile, Seer stirred from sleep, groggy and irritated. He sat up and brewed a cup of restorative tea, his gaze falling on the ashes of the incense he lit the night before. Useless. It hadn't helped him sleep at all. Clearly, the fault wasn't his. It had to be the incense. That shady apothecary must have sold him junk. "Next time I'm back in Banato, I'm breaking his nose." He slung his bag over one shoulder and opened the door to his room. Immediately, a body slumped into the doorway, limp and filthy. Seer instinctively stopped the person from collapsing into his room by nudging them with the tip of his foot. The figure stirred. "Master Seer. I did it." Malo blinked up at him, eyes wide with pride. He looked like he'd been dragged through a sewer. Dried blood, sweat, grime, the works. "You're disgusting." "Get away from me," Seer said, cutting him off immediately. Malo blinked, then looked down at himself, at the bruises, the stains, and the awful smell. "My sincerest apologies for appearing so unseemly before you," he cried, bowing deeply. Then, blushing furiously, he stood up straight and sprinted away with surprising energy. "Looks like he really did take a beating yesterday," Seer mused, watching him disappear down the hallway. "At least he's durable. That's something." All around, doors began to creak open. Candidates peeked out, watching the interaction in silence. "What's your relationship with that kid?" someone asked, cautious but respectful, clearly influenced by Malo's groveling from earlier. Others were watching now too. Whatever Seer said next would shape how they treated the blonde boy going forward. "None," Seer replied bluntly. Then, turning to face the group, his piercing blue eyes locked onto a man with a fresh black eye. "Don't tell me he managed to beat any of you," Seer said, tone laced with disbelief. He gestured toward the hallway where Malo had fled. "That guy is absurdly weak. And one of you got hit. That's honestly shocking." He even clicked his tongue and shook his head in exaggerated disappointment. "Pathetic," he added, before strolling off like none of it concerned him. The moment he left, the group fumed silently. A few rolled up their sleeves and marched off, intent on tracking down the blonde boy who had embarrassed them. Meanwhile, Seer made his way to the dining hall. He sat by the window, eating his breakfast while watching the airship drift across an endless sea of clouds. No land in sight. Just sky and water. An isolated, floating island. Perfect place for a trap. From behind him, two life forces approached, powerful ones. Without looking back, still sipping his tea and gazing out the window, Seer spoke. "Shouldn't examiners be waiting at the official test site? What are you two doing traveling with the candidates?" Behind him, Bindo and Ryomen paused. He hadn't turned around. They had both been using Zetsu, completely suppressing their presence. Yet he'd sensed them effortlessly. Zetsu, a Nen state used to conceal one's aura, rendering them nearly undetectable. Bindo recovered first, offering a laugh. "Well, examiners are only human. Sometimes we like to tag along and take it easy." Ryomen nodded silently beside him. "I see," Seer said, finally turning his head. Leaning against the glass, with the azure sky behind him, he looked like he belonged to it, his blue eyes reflecting the vast horizon. "I figured you were just plotting something to make the exam more fun," he added, casually. Bindo chuckled again but didn't elaborate. Instead, he and Ryomen silently packed their food and exited the dining hall. Once they were gone, Seer stared at his reflection in the window, watching the clouds roll by. Well, now I'm even more sure something's coming. About time this dull flight got interesting. Chapter 37. January 6, 1998, 9 p.m. The airship's loudspeakers crackled to life across every corridor. All candidates on board, please report to the training room immediately. This is a repeat, all candidates, please report to the training room immediately. The message repeated 3 times. Seer, who had just settled into bed, stormed out of his room with a face like thunder, his backpack slung over one shoulder. His expression alone looked capable of killing 100 men on the spot. Apparently, he was the only one who turned in early. By the time he arrived at the training room, the others were already gathered. He was the last to show. The room was packed with candidates. But there were no examiners in sight. The loudspeaker crackled again. Ahem, this is Bindo. It's currently 9:03 p.m. on January 6. Please be sure to arrive at the venue by the 7th, on time. And with that, goodbye for now. His tone was light and teasing. The moment his voice cut off, the floor beneath them split open. Ah! Help! I can't swim. Screams tore through the night as the candidates dropped straight into the ocean below. One after another, they plunged into the deep, uninhabited waters. No boats. No platforms. Just cold, open sea. Like dumplings dropped into a hot pot, Seer commented dryly, floating midair as he watched the chaos unfold. It was honestly amusing, watching them flail around pathetically, almost made up for being woken up. He activated Blue, propelling himself through the air, and swept his gaze across the surroundings with 6 eyes. The airship had dumped them just offshore from the Asian continent. Judging by the distance, 2 to 3 hours of swimming should get you to land. And by on time, they probably mean midnight, about 2 hours from now. Ha! Talk about cutting it close. He looked down at the floundering masses. The moonlight's lovely tonight. Seer called, waving cheerfully from above. Make sure to swim hard. Let it illuminate your hard-working faces. Then, without waiting for a reply, he vanished into the sky. He landed at the forested edge of the Asian continent. 80% of the continent was overrun with dense, dark green jungle, a massive sea of foliage that extended into the horizon. Using 6 eyes, Seer saw that many of the plants pulsed with strong life energy, some even stronger than most of the examinees. The whole forest lit up in his vision like a thermal display. Creatures moved among the trees, nen beasts, animals, maybe worse. But what caught his attention most were the humans already waiting at the edge of the forest. Several hundred of them, scattered throughout. Seer leapt up into a tall tree and perched silently on a branch, keeping a comfortable distance from the crowd. The atmosphere was tense. Silent. No one spoke. Everyone simply watched one another. Then, he spotted it. The strongest aura here. Leaning against a tree, casually flipping a deck of cards in one hand, stood a man with crimson hair, earrings, and a sharp, fox-like gaze. A teardrop and star sat beneath each eye. His lean frame was accentuated by a martial arts outfit and high heels. Seer's expression twitched. Hisoka. He's in this exam? But isn't he supposed to take it next year with Gon and Killua? Seeing him up close was surreal, so much more striking than through a screen. He even walks like he's on a catwalk. Show off. Seer wasn't surprised, though. Of course he recognized Hisoka. He'd watched the anime. Creepy as hell, but weirdly entertaining. And truthfully, he didn't really dislike any anime characters, not even villains. They were fun to watch. That was enough. I guess that's why the fun system chose me. 0 emotional attachment. Just vibes. Even now, in the same world, Seer didn't mind Hisoka. so long as he wasn't Hisoka's next fixation. The problem was, he absolutely fit the type. Young, strong, pretty, promising. A walking Hisoka trap. Just imagining that guy calling him my little green apple made Seer shudder. He vividly recalled the anime scenes, Hisoka watching Gon and Killua from behind with that look, and the faint glow in that region. Nope. Not happening. He can target Gon and Killua all he wants. I'm just here to spectate. If someone else was being creeped on, fine. Seer could appreciate the show. But if it was him? Absolutely not. His solution was simple: don't interact. Hisoka wasn't predictable. Who knew what counted as a trigger for him? Better to stay far, far away. That said, was he even an examinee this year? Maybe he failed this round and reapplied next year. That didn't make sense, though. With his skill, he shouldn't have failed. I should have paid more attention when watching the anime. Seer sighed, leaning back against the tree trunk. Shifting his gaze again, he scanned the next strongest auras. Two figures stood close together in what looked like matching outfits. Their clothes were strange, covered in goat motifs and eyes, like some cult getup. They even had horns on their heads. The shorter one, a girl, held a pure white lamb. The taller one, clearly male, wore a serene smile. Together, they looked like a creepy pastoral painting. Except, the horns were real. And with 6 eyes, Seer could tell instantly, they weren't human. They were 2 blobs of dark, shifting energy. Not even close. Non-humans are taking the hunter exam now? The girl still looked relatively normal. The guy? Totally uncanny. Something about him was just wrong. Even Seer had to admit, their presence was more attention-grabbing than his. And, of course, Hisoka had already noticed them. Seer followed his gaze. The magician was practically salivating, his eyes glued to the horned pair. Seer grimaced and looked away. The next notable aura was weaker than Hisoka and the non-humans but still above the general crowd. It came from a man wielding 2 swords. Looks normal. Stronger than average. But still not that impressive. Annoying, though. How is he allowed to be an examiner while I'm still a candidate? Come on. Even Hisoka must be thinking the same thing. Seer idly swung his legs on the branch. 2 hours passed. Finally, a few soaked figures crawled into the clearing, gasping, stumbling, and collapsing in exhaustion. The man with the 2 swords checked his watch. It's now January 7th, 12 a.m., he said loudly. Registration is closed. Anyone who didn't make it is disqualified. Chapter 38. All eyes turned toward the man with twin swords strapped to his back. Let me introduce myself, he began. I'm this year's examiner, Hoshu. Despite the dozens of eyes watching him, Hoshu appeared completely unfazed. This year's exam venue is the magical beast forest of the Asian continent, he announced. Since moving between locations is inefficient, all of this year's exam stages will be held here. The exam is divided into 2 components, treasure hunting and gourmet cooking. His voice was calm, his arms crossed as he stood at the center of the gathering. I'll explain the treasure hunting portion, said Bindo, stepping forward from the crowd's edge. He wore his usual warm, gentle smile, so pleasant it was borderline suspicious. In simple terms, Bindo continued, we've hidden various treasures throughout this forest. Over the next 7 days, you'll need to find and collect them. Only the 10 candidates who gather the highest value treasures will pass this stage. He spoke so kindly it almost dulled the dread in his words. Then Rojef, his faint greenish skin barely catching the moonlight, took over. As for the cooking portion, during these 7 days, all 3 of us examiners will rely on you for our meals. If even one of us finds your food unacceptable, you fail. But, he added slowly, if you satisfy all three of us, just once, you'll pass that part of the exam. Only those who succeed in both categories will be considered qualified. The crowd stiffened. Fighting? No problem. Cooking? Entirely different story. Hoshu spoke again, his deep voice cutting through the tension. I have no specific requirements for the food. The implication was clear, the treasure hunt alone would likely eliminate a good portion of the candidates. With a crisp clap of his hands, Bindo declared, the exam begins now. In an instant, most of the candidates took off in every direction, vanishing into the forest under the cover of moonlight. The remaining few either hadn't recovered from their unexpected swim or were waiting to observe the other strategies. Hisaka, meanwhile, stayed behind until the two non-human examinees moved, then trailed after them at a leisurely pace. Perfect. Hisaka's attention was thoroughly occupied with the goat-horned weirdos. That meant Seer was in the clear. For now. I'm really not Hisaka's type. He can go play with someone else, Seer muttered internally, leaping into the trees and vanishing into the forest. He avoided teleportation for now. With the trees so dense, Blue would be too destructive and inefficient. Unlike living creatures, treasures didn't emit nen or life energy. However, Seer had noticed something else. Objects handled by humans, especially recently, carried faint aura residue. It was like tracking a scent. If he followed those subtle traces, he could find what others had hidden. The hard part is identifying value, he thought, slowing to a stop before an eerie-looking tree. It stood about 5 meters tall, its bark a strange, deep violet black. Black holes in the trunk resembled gaping eyes and a yawning mouth. Its limbs stretched like twisted arms reaching out. It looked like it belonged in a horror manga. Seer's 6 eyes told him the tree had a nen signature stronger than 90% of the candidates. A devil tree? He guessed aloud, casually assigning it a name. The tree responded. Its hollowed mouth opened wide, unleashing a blood-curdling wail. Ah! Black, thorny vines erupted from its limbs, snapping toward Seer in a flurry of motion. Ugh! So loud, Seer grimaced, covering his ears in irritation. He'd had enough. Lifting his left hand, Blue formed instantly, dark blue energy swirling into a compressed sphere. Gravity bent the surrounding environment toward his palm. Leaves, dust, even small stones were dragged in and shredded by the pressure. Blue. The orb launched forward and struck the tree dead on. A shockwave tore through the forest. The devil tree was vaporized in an instant, replaced by a deep, blackened crater. The impact carved a long trench of destruction through the forest. Yep. Blue's definitely improved, Seer muttered, lowering his hand with satisfaction. He examined the blast zone. No penalty for deforestation, right? This was an exam zone, collateral damage should be allowed. Squatting down, he dug through the scorched earth near the remains of the tree's roots. Soon, he uncovered a small, ornate treasure chest. Opening it revealed a silver-framed mirror, its surface embedded with polished blue gemstones. The glass was pristine. It was elegant, but silver's not worth much. The gemstones might be valuable, Seer muttered, turning it over. If it was an antique, it might be another story. But he had no way to tell. I don't know anything about this world's economy or history. For the first time, he felt the sting of true ignorance. So this is what it's like to be the dumb one. I'm the illiterate here, he muttered bitterly. Then his eyes lit up. Fine. If I can't appraise value, I'll just steal everything. The rules hadn't prohibited it. If he gathered more loot than anyone else, by any means, he'd still win. And if other candidates were busy getting eaten by magical beasts or wrapped up by cursed vines, all the better. 6 Eyes gives me a map. I'll just wait for people to find treasure, then swoop in like a crow. Work hard, everyone, he said cheerfully, reclining against a nearby tree with a relaxed smile. Your success directly determines mine. The moonlight filtered through the canopy above, illuminating Seer's face as he rested. It was peaceful. Too peaceful. Time to stir the pot. He closed his eyes and expanded his perception, scanning the forest for intersecting life forces. There. 2 candidates were about to cross paths. Seer stood up, eyes gleaming with mischief, and gently pushed off the tree. His figure vanished into the trees, like a whisper on the wind. Chapter 39. This world is ruled by the strong. Resistance from the weak, human or otherwise, only ends in a harsh reminder of their place. Life and death are often separated by a single heartbeat. Take, for example, a corner of the forest. A lone candidate was surrounded by a herd of strange wild boars. They were completely pink, with glowing, magma-like lines etched along their backs. The boars had encircled the examinee and were gradually closing in. The candidate gripped a treasure chest in one hand, a knife in the other. After a few desperate slashes that barely scratched the creatures, he turned and bolted. From afar, it was almost a comedy sketch. Why do those pigs smell? Delicious? Seer murmured as he floated midair, using his 6 eyes to monitor the chaos below. His enhanced senses picked up the unmistakable aroma of grilled meat, smoky, rich, and mouth-watering. Did Sukuna's power boost my sense of smell too? A gourmet-level nose? That was the only explanation. He could smell roast pork from dozens of meters away, and the scent only intensified as the boars ran. Below, the panicked candidate slowed. His face was dazed, even blissful. Drool trickled from the corner of his mouth. Then, boom! The herd crashed into him like a battering ram. He was launched into the air, and before he could fall, the pigs leapt, short, powerful legs catapulting them upward. They slammed him back to the ground with brutal force. No scream. No struggle. Just silence. His corpse crumpled next to the treasure chest, which landed nearby, now stained with his blood. A pale hand, decorated with 2 black rings around the wrist, reached down and lifted the chest. The scent they give off must mess with perception, Seer muttered, examining the chest while watching the pink pigs regroup. Another cluster, on their hind legs now, stomped at the dirt. Their eyes were bloodshot, teeth bared. The smell intensified. Ah! They're trying to lure me in. How thoughtful, Seer mused aloud. Maybe I'll kill one. If it tastes good, I'll keep some around to eat later. With a flick of his finger, the nearest pig was instantly sliced into dozens of clean cuts, like freshly butchered pork. The rest of the herd, which had been brimming with rage, suddenly froze. Their eyes cleared. Then they turned. And ran. Smart pigs. Seer didn't bother chasing them. He approached the neatly carved meat, kneeling beside the steaming cuts. Perfect balance of lean and fat. Cooked evenly, medium rare. A single bite confirmed it, the meat was tender, flavorful, and subtly sweet, likely from a diet of forest fruits and herbs. Perfect ingredient. Juicy. Tender. No gamey aftertaste. I'll call them roast fragrance pigs, he declared cheerfully, already finishing off the entire carcass. The name suits them. He patted his stomach, estimating himself about 70% full. No extra prep needed. Just slice and serve. Tomorrow morning, he'd offer this to the examiners. The next morning, Seer arrived at the examiner's rest area with a massive lotus leaf, piled with perfectly sliced roast pork. He'd plucked the leaf off the head of a giant frog lounging in a lake. Along the way, he passed several other candidates also carrying dishes, but each one acted secretive and cautious, like they'd discovered the recipe for immortality. Surprisingly, despite the night of forest danger, most candidates had survived. The 3 examiners sat at a long table, ready to judge. One by one, the dishes were presented. Unqualified. What is this, poison? You didn't clean the fish or remove the guts. Disgusting. Vegetarian? I see no sincerity in this. This mushroom is obviously toxic. Are you blind? Candidate after candidate was brutally cut down, figuratively, for now, by critiques sharper than blades. Seer stepped forward with confidence and presented his roast pork. The response? Unqualified. You think we're wild animals? You just sliced up a pig. No skill. No sincerity. No effort. Only beasts would eat something this raw. The 3 examiners each took a bite and glared at him. The white-haired boy stood in silence, expression unreadable. His fingers twitched. Clench. Relax. Clench. Relax. Do not kill the examiners, he reminded himself. With a pitch-black expression, Seer turned away and stepped aside to observe the others. A red-haired man, HxH, presented grilled fish next. His result? This is revolting. Even a dog would spit this out, Bindo said pleasantly, smile intact. It was clear he knew the man, which made the cutting remarks even more venomous. Seer watched as HxH's face twisted into a subtle, chilling grin. His cards twitched between his fingers. But like Seer, he held back. Then came the goat-horn siblings. They presented a plate of grass. This isn't food. These are inedible. Disqualified, Hoshu roared, slamming the table. Seer nodded to himself. Maybe they really do eat grass. Next, a golden-haired boy stepped forward, Malo. He nervously presented grilled fish, infused with apples and herbs. The reactions changed. This smells pretty good. Flavors balanced. Apple, mushroom, thyme. Subtle and earthy. Malo, cheeks slightly flushed, bowed as he explained, I stuffed the herbs and fruit inside the fish, then grilled it over applewood. You pass, the 3 examiners announced in unison. Seer blinked. So that's the standard. The other candidates looked stunned. And desperate. Hope surged through the crowd. I can just copy that. Don't even think about it, Hoshu snapped coldly. If we see the same dish again, you'll all fail. Hope, promptly crushed. By the end of the morning, 80% of the candidates were radiating violent intent. The remaining 20% were dead inside. And Malo, the lone candidate to receive a pass, was now a marked man. If I can't cook, maybe someone else can, the others reasoned. Seer had the same thought. Sukuna had Yuraum. Gojo had assistants to hold his umbrella. Ryomen Satoru. Need a personal chef. He folded his arms and stared after Malo with a satisfied smirk. Time to hire my first servant. Chapter 40. After breakfast ended, the candidates resumed their hunt for treasures. To stir up competition, the examiners had announced that treasure value would only be evaluated on the 7th day. Until then, each candidate was responsible for guarding their own finds. Protecting your treasure was part of the exam. While some combed the forest with determination, others took a more sinister route. Malo, now infamous for his surprisingly good grilled fish, found himself the target of a growing number of candidates with twisted smiles and hungry eyes. Taking a deep breath, Malo turned, and ran. Don't let him get away. Catch him. Our entire exam depends on him. I'm not helping any of you, Malo shouted over his shoulder. There was no chance he'd cook for people trying to kidnap or coerce him. A knife whistled through the air behind him. Instinctively, Malo dove to the ground. The blade embedded itself into a tree trunk ahead. He scrambled up and bolted deeper into the woods. He remembered seeing beast tracks and large droppings during treasure hunting the day before. If he could reach that area, there was definitely a powerful magical beast nearby. Once it appeared, those chasing him would have bigger problems than capturing him. Of course, it was a gamble. He'd be in danger too. But Malo was confident in his agility, and with a whole crowd of people behind him, the beast would have plenty to eat. Once full, it likely wouldn't bother chasing him. 80% chance of survival. The other 20%? That depended on whether the beast was insane enough to kill for sport. Faster. I need to be faster. The golden-haired boy sprinted with everything he had, the mob close behind. High above, Seer observed the unfolding scene, reclining lazily midair. Using 6 eyes, he scanned the terrain. If Malo continued on his current route, he'd run into 3 magical beasts within 3 minutes, each one strong enough to annihilate 10 candidates. So, this was planned. Exactly 3 minutes later, the ambush was sprung. The mob came face to face with 3 massive beasts, each 5 meters tall, like upright grizzly bears, but with single jagged horns jutting from their foreheads. Let's call them unicorn bears, Seer mused. The moment the crowd saw the beasts, they froze. Over here, Malo yelled, hurling a rock at one of them. It barely did any damage, but it got the point across. The unicorn bear, insulted by this weak 2-legged insect, flew into a rage. It roared and slammed its paw into the ground. Malo took off running again, fast enough to stay ahead of everyone else, making it look like the mob was still chasing him. In truth, everyone was running for their lives. This kid really is two-faced, Seer muttered, watching with faint amusement. He'd suspected as much. Someone that physically weak making it to the airship meant they had brains or manipulation. Probably both. Sure enough, Malo had the instincts of a survivor. But he made one mistake. The unicorn bear's sense of smell, and its desire for vengeance, was exceptional. It tore through several examinees while chasing Malo, but once it realized he was the true culprit, it ignored the others entirely. For 2 full hours, the bear pursued Malo relentlessly. Every time Malo thought he'd shaken it, it reappeared, never quite catching him, but never letting him rest. Like a predator playing with its prey. Eventually, Malo collapsed. His vision blurred. His legs failed him. Drip. Drip. A foul-smelling liquid dripped onto his face. As his eyes adjusted, he found himself staring directly into the gaping maw of the beast. Its long tongue lolled out, saliva dripping like a waterfall onto his cheeks. Am I going to die? The bear licked his face but didn't start with the head. Instead, it pinned him down with a paw, intending to start at the feet, to let him watch himself be devoured. Its jaw opened wider. Then it bit. Ah! Malo's scream tore through the forest. A chunk of flesh was ripped from his leg, exposing the glistening white of bone. It hurts so much. Help me. Somebody. But no one came. Just like no one came when his so-called siblings had beaten him back home. He was going to die here. Alone. Screaming. I don't want to die. His eyes dulled, gaze fixed on the sky above. And then, he saw something. A lone figure in the clouds, like a mirage painted across the heavens. Do you want my help? Asked the voice, calm and emotionless. Malo blinked. The boy's white hair and sky-colored eyes made him nearly indistinguishable from the backdrop. The bear stopped. Warily, it turned toward the new presence. Hope reignited in Malo's eyes. Save me, he gasped, reaching up as if to grasp the sky itself. Seer descended, landing lightly beside him. All right. Consider it today's good deed, he said flatly, as dark blue nen enveloped his right fist. The bear reared up, raising its paw. Seer blocked it with his left hand, casually. Then, with a flick of his right fist, he punched the bear in the gut. The shockwave knocked the unicorn bear several meters back. It collapsed, wheezing. Seer turned and looked down at Malo's mangled leg. "How pathetic," he said coldly. "If you don't have strength, even the smartest plan can kill you. You've got a long way to go." Lord Seer." Malo wheezed. His lips quivered, but he smiled through the pain. "I'm glad I got to see you again. After breakfast, I was going to find you, but then everything went wrong. I thought I wouldn't get the chance." His words tumbled out in a delirious stream. "Find me?" Seer raised an eyebrow. "Please. Let me follow you." Malo knelt, bowing so low his forehead touched the forest floor. "I'll wash your clothes, cook, clean, anything, just let me stay with you." He was trembling, his breathing uneven, not from the pain of his shredded leg, but from fear. Fear of rejection. A pool of blood spread beneath him, but he didn't seem to care. Seer stared for a moment, lips twitching into a faint smile. So that's what this was. All that dramatic build-up to make Malo desperate, terrified, and grateful, turns out, it wasn't necessary at all. He would have bowed anyway. Oh well. The result was the same. "All right," Seer said casually, pulling a pouch of medicine from his backpack and tossing it at Malo's feet. "Use that. I don't want a cripple following me around." Chapter 41. Congratulations, host. Compatibility with Ryomen Sukuna has increased by 10%. Current compatibility between Satoru Gojo, Ryomen Sukuna is at 50%. The system shop is now unlocked. Right after Seer agreed to let Malo follow him, the system notification chimed. Let's see what the system shop has to offer. He casually settled down beneath a tree. Malo limped along behind him, silent despite his wounds, his face a portrait of admiration and reverence. Though Seer looked vacant, his attention was fully absorbed by the virtual screen only he could see. The newly unlocked shop was filled with, of course, cursed tools. Figures. The system's prepping me for a jump to the Jujutsu Kaisen world. But would these cursed tools work properly in the Hunter x Hunter world? And the prices? One item immediately caught Seer's attention. Item name, Inverted Spear of Heaven effect, forcefully nullifies activated techniques. Price, 10 billion jenny. Description, known as the Satoru Gojo of cursed tools, this weapon was used by Toji Fushiguro to fatally wound Satoru Gojo. Ah. So that's why it costs 10 billion. Honestly, fair enough. But still. Would the effect actually function in this world? Host, rest assured. All items have been modified to function across multiversal systems. Okay, promising. Tempting, even. But still absurdly out of reach. Right now, Seer only had about 50 million jenny. Barely enough for pocket lint in this shop. System, do you have Gojo Satoru sunglasses? Item is exclusive to 6-Eyes users but is not stocked due to low demand. So it's not profitable, so you don't bother. Typical greedy merchant behavior. Well, they're not essential. Honestly. I kind of enjoy this feeling, Seer muttered aloud. The overload of sensory input had initially felt like getting a drill through his skull. Add in nosebleeds and a constant buzzing in his ears, and most people would have gone mad. But he'd adapted. Now, the intensity of 6-Eyes felt unique, stimulating. If it disappeared, life might even feel dull. Maybe I'm a masochist. No, wait, this isn't rationalizing. Definitely not. What kind of feeling does Master enjoy? Malo asked suddenly, his voice low and oddly eager. Defeating strong opponents, Seer answered without missing a beat. Malo's green eyes widened, then sparkled. As expected of you, Master. Is this guy? My obsessive fan? One of those unstable types who worship everything I say. Seer narrowed his gaze slightly, then looked away. Whatever. The thoughts of the weak don't matter, they can't affect anything. He returned to browsing the shop, and one item in particular caught his interest. Item name, Inventory Curse Effect, allows item storage via curse technique. Price, 1 billion jenny. Description, a storage expert that calls you mom. Yes, really. Ugly. But functional. It would beat lugging around a half-empty backpack and constantly restocking supplies. With this, he could survive in the wilderness for months. And if I get that, I might as well grab the inverted spear too. Now the problem was, how do I earn 11 billion jenny? He muttered aloud. Robbery? Maybe. But I'd have to find which gang has the most money first. Business? Too slow. Needs capital, logistics, effort. As they say, crime pays faster. Not legally, but faster. Even in this world, murder and robbery were crimes. That's why bounties and wanted lists existed. And if he killed too many people, the Hunter Association would eventually dispatch a cleanup squad. I'd become this world's final boss. Tempting. But not ideal, yet. Master. Malo extended a cup of juice, the vessel woven from dark green leaves. It was freshly pressed apple juice. Do you need money? He asked softly. Yeah, Seer replied bluntly, taking the cup. Here. Malo held out a black card with both hands. When I left home, I brought a few valuables. I sold them and converted everything into jenny. I haven't had any reason to spend it, he added with a calm tone. I only brought those things because I was bitter. How much is on the card? Seer asked, taking it without hesitation. About 200 million jenny. Still far from what you need, master. I couldn't bring more at the time. He'd taken a few small items from his father's study, portable, inconspicuous things. The truly valuable assets had been out of reach. You're richer than you look, Seer said, slipping the card into his bag without ceremony. Should I start calling you young master instead? Malo bowed his head and stirred the fire, checking the meat skewers. As the flames crackled, he began speaking in a soft, even voice. My full name is Malo Palisha. My father, Kazmu Palisha, is one of the major power holders in York New City. The things I brought when I left, they meant nothing to him. I'm just an illegitimate child. My mother was a prostitute raised in the red light district. My father has over 30 legitimate children. I'm viewed as the bastard son of a promiscuous woman. A stain on the family name. My siblings torment me for fun, competing over who can make me cry or beg the fastest. Seer's face remained blank. How cliché. Not even a hint of originality. No dead parents. No entire clan massacred. No incurable illness. After watching thousands of anime and games, Seer had long become desensitized to sob stories. Still, Malo continued. His voice remained steady, like he wasn't even talking about himself. One time, when I was locked in a dog cage, starving and close to passing out, I met a man. He didn't free me, but he cooked a meal outside the cage. It was delicious. Before he left, he said he was a gourmet hunter. And that cages were meant for pets. He hoped that next time he saw me, I wouldn't be in one. I decided then, I wanted to become a gourmet hunter too. Malo smiled gently as he pulled the meat from the fire and handed it to Seer. It's done. Please enjoy. Seer took a bite, ignoring the rest of Malo's story entirely. Your cooking skills are worthy of a gourmet hunter, he remarked. Chapter 42. Let's serve this to the examiner at noon, Mero said, carefully packing a portion of the roasted meat and setting it aside. However, the white-haired, blue-eyed boy refused. No, you teach me how to do it. I'll make it myself. With how picky they are, if you cook it, they'll probably reject it just to spite you, Seer muttered, his eyelids half lowered in boredom. His tone was casual but loaded with understanding. As expected of you, master. You've really thought it through, Mero replied, grinning like a professional bootlicker, expertly supplying emotional support. It must be really easy for you, he added, full of certainty. Probably. Seer thought, uncertain. Whether or not he had any actual cooking talent remained to be seen. Just slice along the grain, sprinkle herbs once it's seared, and brush the skin with honey while it's hot. Mero instructed seriously. Seer mirrored his seriousness, following each step with precision and care. Suddenly, his gaze flipped to the rear left. A chubby candidate emerged from the underbrush, trailed by a massive flying beast with a wingspan over 2 meters and claws that looked ready to shred steel. This guy looks familiar. Help! The chubby candidate's face lit up with relief at the sight of Seer and Mero. Run! That magical beast is dangerous. But even as he shouted, he was secretly gleeful. Run, run! I've already set up a trap up ahead. Once these two bolt, they'll run right into it. Then everything, treasures, that golden-haired kid, will be ours. But the more he ran, the more his smile stiffened. Why? Why are they just sitting there? Why do they look so calm? Why do they look like they're watching a clown show? Ah! I remember now, Seer said, a spark of recognition in his voice. It was Tunpa. The rookie crusher. The guy who fed Gon and Killua spiked juice in the original Hunter exam. So now he's targeting me and Mero. Why aren't you running? Tunpa shouted, growing nervous. That's when he saw the white-haired boy lift a single finger. A split second later, Tunpa was drenched in steaming fluids. Blood. Organs. Something heavy hit the ground with a sickening thud. He turned to see the magical beast he'd been running from lying in pieces, its wings torn, its head severed, its insides spilling out. Oh no! Oh no no no! I messed with a monster. Tunpa immediately collapsed, going limp like a rag doll. He lay there, unmoving, pretending to have fainted. As expected of you, master. So powerful. And we got new ingredients too. I've heard this species tastes amazing. Mero chirped as he jogged over to collect the mangled bird. Really? Then let's try it, Seer said indifferently. Tunpa tried to slowly slither away like a worm. He clearly heard the laughter behind him, but he didn't dare open his eyes. Once he thought he was far enough, he leapt up and bolted into the forest, his face pale with terror. Continue, Seer said, poking the fire as if nothing had happened. Where were we? By noon, they returned to the familiar clearing. The same long table. The same examiners. The same sharp tongues. But this time, the 3 examiners hesitated. The aroma. It's definitely better than this morning, one of them admitted. Because I stuffed it with sour berries and glazed the skin with herbs and honey, Seer replied flatly, serving up his roasted bird, the same one Tunpa had summoned earlier. He'd done everything himself under Mero's guidance. Can I be marked as qualified now? Seer asked, growing visibly impatient. Of course. Unqualified, Bindo said slowly, dragging out the words before delivering the final blow. Huh? Seer's voice was quiet. His patience, already hanging by a thread, snapped. You didn't make this, Hoshu said. Someone else must have prepared it. You didn't put in the effort. These pompous fools. No, I watched Master Seer cook it from start to finish. Mero rushed forward, shouting in his defense. You guys have been pissing me off since the beginning, Seer said, lifting his head slowly. His smile was too bright. Too pleasant. It made the air around him feel like ice. I'm really done with being judged by weaklings. A dark blue aura exploded from his body. Even those without Nen could feel it, a pressure so heavy it made the grass shiver. Boom! Seer vanished, reappearing behind Bindo with his hand already on the examiner's head. He slammed him forward into the table, splitting it in half. Hoshu immediately drew his twin knives. Rogoff readied himself at a distance, arm extended. Seer's grin turned devilish. His fingers clenched tighter around Bindo's skull. His grip cracked the aura-shielded head beneath it. "You're going to eat every bite of that food, got it?" he said, crouching down. He grabbed the meat that had fallen into the dirt, now mixed with mud and roots, and shoved it into Bindo's mouth. He covered Bindo's lips with his hand. "Swallow it." Bindo swallowed. Only then did Seer let go. "Know your place, idiot," Seer said, flinging Bindo to the side like a broken toy. He then appeared in front of Rogoff and kicked him with full force. Rogoff flew through the air, crashing through 3 trees. Then Seer reappeared behind Hoshu and stomped on his back, driving him face first into the dirt. "You violated the rules," Rogoff shouted, clutching his ribs. "You attacked the examiners. That's grounds for disqualification." His voice wavered. Even with Nen defense, they couldn't touch him. Seer pressed his foot deeper into Hoshu's spine and tilted his head. "So what? Gonna disqualify me?" He smiled again. "Then maybe I'll just kill you all." His voice was soft, almost sweet. But the killing intent behind it was ice cold and suffocating. "Cough. Calm down and let him go." Bindo reappeared, bruised and humiliated. This brat, this child, had broken him mentally more than physically. "I can also testify. He really did cook it himself." Tunpa suddenly ran out, dragging 2 more candidates as witnesses. "He did. I swear." Tunpa pleaded, desperate to avoid being targeted again. "You believe me now?" Seer asked, stepping on Hoshu's head like a soccer ball. Each time the examiner lifted his head, Seer would stomp it back down. "You're going to apologize now. Apologize for your arrogance. For your pride. For your stupidity." He smiled sweetly, eyes brimming with mockery. "It better satisfy me, examiner." "Hey hunters, mandatory cult break. Stretch your legs, hydrate, touch grass if possible, and whisper all hail Supreme Killua into the void." Now back to the fanfic grind. Blue heart emoji, high voltage sign emoji. Chapter 43. In the dead silence, the 2 standing examiners finally moved. "It was our mistake, so we should give you a passing evaluation," Bindo said through gritted teeth, clearly unwilling. "I also give you a passing evaluation," Rogoff said indifferently. Everyone's eyes turned to the white-haired boy, their minds filled with a single question: would he accept the examiner's apology? Seer pressed down harder on the head beneath his foot, grinding it into the ground. His smile was laced with malice. "No, I don't feel any sincerity from you at all. When you've made a mistake and need to apologize, you should try harder to show you mean it. At least put in some effort to make me satisfied." He bent down, grabbing the examiner's hair and forcing his head up. His words struck a chord of familiarity with both the candidates and the examiners. Upon closer thought, this supposed sincerity sounded exactly like the critique the examiners had given earlier during the food evaluation. "Vryssorry. We were too hasty in our judgment. Please let go of Hoshu." Bindo apologized one word at a time, his face as dark as if he just lost his entire family. "We've come to appreciate the sincerity in your cooking," Rogoff added reluctantly. Truth be told, being forced to eat the spilled dish didn't help them feel any sincerity, but they had definitely tasted dirt and grass. "How did my cooking taste?" Seer pressed further, unwilling to let the matter go. "Delicious," Bindo answered, and it looked as though he'd been drained of all his energy in saying so. "Yes, it was very delicious," Rogoff echoed in a subdued tone. PFFT, Seer chuckled, glancing down at the person still stuck in the pit. What about you? You, Hoshu spat out a mouthful of dirt, his expression twisted with rage. Mind your tone. That's not how you should be apologizing, Examiner, Seer snapped, pushing the man's face back into the dirt with a thud. His tone was irritated. Already, Seer's constant headache was testing his patience. These fools were making it worse. 3 seconds later, he yanked Hoshu's head back up. Delicious, Hoshu forced out, mud covering his face as he spoke with rigid precision. Then there's no problem. I've passed the culinary test, right? Seer asked as he stood up, clapping his hands as though wiping off dirt. The 3 examiners remained silent, so Seer raised his gaze and looked at them one by one. Of course, you've passed, Bindo admitted begrudgingly, his expression sour. Good. The white-haired boy exhaled, as if relieved. Cooking for others really isn't my thing. Definitely won't happen again. He turned and began walking toward the depths of the forest, his ears picking up a cascade of laughter behind him. The laughter was excited, frenzied, even breathless, the kind you'd hear in an anime and immediately know that the character was a complete maniac. And the only maniac here was Seer, expressionless and unbothered, didn't look back. He didn't need to. He knew perfectly well who was watching him. He could feel Hisoka's gaze burning into him. After all, Hisoka's whole reason for participating in the Hunter exam was to seek out worthy opponents and spot promising future rivals. Given the strength Seer had just demonstrated, there was no way Hisoka wouldn't set his sights on him. Even without turning around, Seer could feel the waves of bloodlust and excitement emanating from Hisoka. The candidates left behind at the scene were in for a rough time. Well, that had nothing to do with him. The white-haired boy's figure gradually disappeared from view, while a golden-haired one hurried to follow him. The remaining candidates returned their attention to the ongoing test. Fail. This is awful. Is this food or animal feed? I'd rather eat mud dredged up from a swamp than this. The 3 examiners, still seething with anger, unleashed even harsher critiques on the other candidates. Ahahaha, the red-haired man, facing the harsh reviews, merely licked the cards in his hand, his throat releasing a twisted, guttural laugh. I've already. His face flushed, and his voice wavered with unsettling pleasure. Had enough. Before he finished speaking, the cards in his hand shot out, cutting through the air and claiming the lives of those present. Sensing several life forces vanish in an instant behind him, Seer didn't even glance back. You should walk separately from me now, he said to Mero, who was following close behind. Is there a problem? Mero asked, confused but clearly concerned. It won't be long before a lunatic comes looking for me, and I'm not about to go out of my way to protect you, Seer replied with a click of his tongue, waving dismissively. If those 3 examiners hadn't been so obnoxious, he wouldn't have had to get involved. Honestly, what a hassle. With your level of skill, sticking by my side is a guaranteed death sentence, Seer added with a smirk, knowing full well Hisoka was after him. Far from being worried, he even had the presence of mind to mock Mero's lack of strength. I understand now. If I continue following you, I'll only hold you back, Mero said with a serious expression. He turned to leave without hesitation. Please take care, he added, his tone devoid of worry, as though firmly believing the young man before him would undoubtedly prevail. That unwavering confidence, bordering on blind faith, made Seer touch his chin thoughtfully. It was true he needed to be cautious, after all, Hisoka was no ordinary opponent. Seer couldn't definitively say who was stronger between them without actually crossing fists. Different worlds had entirely different power systems, making direct comparisons tricky. Seer judged his current strength to be roughly equivalent to 4 or 5 of Sukuna's fingers. As for Hisoka, it was harder to gauge. The man's life force was undeniably vigorous, but in a system like Nen, the power one could exert depended heavily on how well the individual developed their abilities. From Hisoka's application of bungee gum and texture surprise, it was evident he'd refined his Nen abilities to an impressive degree. Who knew what other tricks he might have? The more Seer thought about it, the more troublesome it seemed. While Hisoka's Nen was highly optimized, his own ability was annoyingly random. Still, once he got a better understanding of the effects of the cards, Seer figured he'd gain better control over his powers. Seriously, isn't Hisoka supposed to be distracted by those two non-human siblings? Seer muttered, lowering his gaze just in time to see a pure white lamb stumble out of the bushes, bleeding as it clumsily bumped into him. With a loud thud, it collapsed, unmoving. If memory served him right, this was the pet of the younger sister of those non-human siblings. What was it doing here? Where were those two? Closing his eyes, Seer scanned the area with his 6 eyes, searching for the two uniquely conspicuous life signatures. After a moment of observation, he noted that the pair wasn't particularly close. Might as well go find them, then. He had some questions for them anyway. Faking an accident, huh? Should I turn you into roast lamb? Seer picked up the little lamb by its scruff, shaking it lightly as he spoke with mock malice. The lamb, seemingly oblivious to his words, let out a series of distressed bleats. Still shaking the lamb playfully, Seer started making his way toward the siblings' location. Chapter 44. By a lake, with curved horns like those of a bighorn sheep adorning their heads and their strange attire, they cut peculiar silhouettes. They leaned forward, gazing intently into the water as if trying to see the bottom. Still no luck, brother, the golden-haired girl said softly. Don't worry. We've got plenty of time, the boy replied in a low voice. What are you looking for? Seer, with his white hair and blue eyes, suddenly appeared behind them. Like a ghost, he leaned in close to the boy and asked quietly. We're looking for treasure, the two humanoid beings replied calmly, their expressions composed despite Seer standing so close it breached normal social boundaries. I thought you might be looking for this, Seer said nonchalantly, tossing the bleeding lamb to the girl. Oh, it's our lamb. You've come back. The girl caught the lamb effortlessly and stroked its soft fur. She leaned close to its ear and began whispering. The lamb responded with bleats, and the girl nodded as if they were having a meaningful conversation. By the way, can I touch you too? Seer tilted his head, resting his chin between his thumb and forefinger. He had been observing the two non-humans with his 6 eyes for a while, curiosity clearly building. Even as he asked, his hands had already reached out, poking their faces and giving them a few squeezes. Soft. Nothing unusual. The texture felt entirely human. Though their essence appeared to be dark, viscous matter when viewed through his 6 eyes, their appearance and texture were surprisingly ordinary. The siblings showed identical reactions, mildly bewildered and curious but unbothered. They didn't resist, perhaps because they sensed no malice from Seer's actions. Finding it less interesting than expected, Seer withdrew his hands, disappointed. He had hoped for something more unique from touching non-human entities, but they turned out to be unexpectedly mundane. Oh, right. There was a red-haired guy following you two earlier. Did you end up fighting him? Seer finally voiced the question he had come to ask. Why would we fight him? The sister adjusted her glasses, responding reflexively. He was troublesome, so we used a little trick to make him lose track of us, the brother answered with a smile. Given his bizarre outfit, even his smile looked unsettling. A trick? Ah. Seer's expression shifted to a mix of confusion and realization. No wonder Hisoka had seemed so eager and restless, it must have been because he couldn't fight the targets he originally fixated on. Still, Hisoka's slightly deranged state. It felt halfway like his true nature surfacing and halfway like he'd been affected by some strange ability. Hard to say. Seer hadn't even spared the man a glance, so he'd need to use his 6 eyes for a closer look to confirm. It probably had something to do with the trick these 2 non-humans mentioned. "What are your names?" Seer asked, his curiosity about the pair persisting. "Ellie. Amy." The siblings answered in unison, like model students replying to a teacher's question. "Do you 2 need hunter licenses too?" Seer asked, puzzled. Would non-humans even need hunter licenses? Besides, to claim a license, one had to go to the Hunter Association at the end of the exam. Wouldn't these 2 risk being discovered there? The Hunter Association surely had its share of strong individuals. "We're here to find something. It just so happened that their airship was picking people up, and it's headed in the same direction we need to go," Amy, the brother, explained. "Ah, hitchhiking," Seer replied knowingly. "So that's it. Non-humans joining the Hunter exam for a license seemed strange, turns out they were just hitching a ride. Makes sense now. Where are you 2 from?" Seer asked, suspicion flickering in his mind. Non-humans who could maintain human forms. It made him think of the Hunter world's so-called forbidden territory, the Dark Continent. Could these 2 have come from there? "A small fishing village on an isolated island," Amy finally answered after some thought. He couldn't even recall the name of the village. "My brother and I were just floating in the sea, and they pulled us out," Ellie explained in a slightly puzzled tone, as if unsure why the villagers had bothered to bring them ashore. PFFT, Seer couldn't hold back his laughter. The image of 2 non-humans aimlessly drifting in the ocean was amusing enough. But what really cracked him up was their confusion about why the villagers had saved them. Well, obviously, the villagers must have thought they were rescuing 2 shipwrecked teens. They probably believed they'd saved 2 human kids, never realizing they'd fished out a pair of strange beings. Floating at sea, though. Was it that odd beings were naturally drawn to the ocean? Like grotesque deep-sea creatures or slumbering ancient gods? Seer sighed inwardly, deciding not to ask where they were really from. He'd probably get some bizarre, unheard-of answer that didn't exist on any current map. "All right, keep searching for your treasure," Seer said, casually waving goodbye before vanishing from sight. The 2 non-humans turned back to the lake, resuming their search. Elsewhere, Seer found a quiet spot to sit. He used his 6 eyes to scan the surroundings, ensuring no immediate danger lurked nearby. "Time for my daily luck test," he murmured, raising a hand toward the empty air. "The Wheel of Law, activate." A spinning roulette appeared before him, and after a moment, 3 cards materialized in his hand. Seer lazily glanced at the cards. The Fool, reversed. The Priestess, reversed. The Magician, reversed. 3 debuff cards? He sighed. It seemed his luck today was absolutely awful. He needed to use them within 30 minutes, or the effects would turn on him instead. The Priestess, reversed, mental turmoil. The Magician, reversed, willpower drain. Anything related to order, rules, the mind, or willpower always sounds vague. Who knows what the actual effects will be, Seer muttered, twirling the cards idly between his fingers. For now, he didn't move, waiting for the right opportunity to pass the misfortune on to someone else. Seer decided to wait right here for Hisoka to come to him. After all, once Hisoka fixated on a target, he wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. In the meantime, Seer planned to throw those 3 debuff cards at Hisoka and see exactly what kind of effects they'd have. Stay still, Seer warned, patting the restless tree behind him. He leaned against its trunk, his senses alert for any movement in the surroundings. Through his 6 eyes, he sensed Hisoka's life energy rapidly closing in. The man clearly didn't know Seer's exact location, so he was carving a bloody path through the forest in search of him. One human life force after another vanished, as if Hisoka wouldn't stop until he wiped out everyone in the forest to find Seer. I knew my charm was irresistible, Seer thought, amused at the situation. He recalled his earlier musings and couldn't help but chuckle. Sure enough, HxH had abandoned the exam entirely to chase after him. Chapter 45. At some point, the small animals in the forest began to flee in all directions, while birds flapped their wings silently, soaring into the sky. Even the larger predators grew restless, running aimlessly like headless flies. The forest became eerily silent, almost deathly still. It was as if this calm heralded an impending catastrophe. Even the magical plants rooted in the ground quieted down, acting like ordinary vegetation, utterly motionless. A white-haired, blue-eyed boy sat casually beneath a tree. One leg lay flat, the other bent upward. His head hung low, his face obscured by the shadows cast by the leaves above. Suddenly, he pushed against the ground with one hand, rolling several times to avoid an unexpected projectile. As he looked up, he saw several playing cards embedded deeply in the ground, more than halfway buried. A red-haired man appeared, his movements seemingly unhurried, yet so swift it seemed he closed the distance in mere flashes, stopping just 10 meters from Seer. "Such a delicious fruit," the man said, his exaggerated grin stretching unnaturally wide. His deep, raspy voice betrayed a certain excitement. "Tch." Seer straightened up and clicked his tongue in irritation. "Play with me, won't you?" "Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha," HxH laughed, arms crossed, his entire body trembling with glee. Pink Nen energy silently emanated from him, stretching like highly elastic chewing gum, moving at incredible speed. The moment Seer sensed that energy, he retreated without hesitation, simultaneously raising his left hand. A formless slash burst forth. The strike collided with the pink Nen, severing it cleanly. HxH's face lit up with a thoughtful expression. "You can see my Nen. And even cut it." "Hey," HxH chuckled again, his voice low and full of sinister delight. "You seem even tastier now." He ran his tongue over his upper lip. At the same time, even more pink Nen tendrils extended from HxH, stronger and denser than before. An invisible pressure blanketed the area within a 100-meter radius. Seer frowned, his figure leaping into the air as he snapped impatiently, "Don't treat me like one of your farm apples." As his words fell, several more slashes shot forth. The normally invisible Nen collided with Seer's formless strikes. Due to the unique properties of HxH's Nen, soft and elastic like rubber, no sound was produced when the two forces clashed. But this time, the slashes failed to cut through. "Can't slice it?" Seer furrowed his brow. "Ah, so elastic things are harder to sever with sharp attacks?" No. It was because HxH had strengthened his Nen. The potency of any attack, after all, depended on the user's energy output. Seer's current strength was heavily restricted. Without the ability to open a domain or use other offensive techniques, he was limited to relying solely on his current skill set. His capabilities felt incomplete. HxH stood still, his hands raised, manipulating the tendrils of Nen with his 10 fingers. "Very good. So very good." Hey, the energy around HxH grew denser, his aura intensifying by the second. Seer raised his head, choosing not to dodge further and instead swiftly increased the distance between them. The area was saturated with HxH's Nen, visible through Seer's 6 eyes as an overwhelming swarm of pink energy tendrils. "Disgusting." "Blue." Seer raised his hands, dark blue cursed energy condensing in front of his palms. "Maximum output." The orb grew rapidly in size, pulling nearby objects, including HxH's embedded playing cards, into its gravitational field. The powerful force even caused their hair to stand on end. "Get lost." Seer hurled the orb toward HxH's position. The resulting explosion blasted a massive crater into the ground, erasing all traces of the Nen lingering in the vicinity. Even the surrounding trees were reduced to nothing but bare roots. but there was no sign of HxH in the pit. Gone. He's fast. The life energy that represented HxH darted rapidly through the forest, concealed by the trees as he continuously changed positions. Locking onto him was impossible. This guy really is a nightmare to deal with. Seer raised his hand and unleashed another attack. Wherever HxH's life energy appeared, Seer sent a blast of cleave or blue flying toward it. Within a radius of 300 meters, trees fell one after another, yet HxH remained agile, his presence constantly flitting around. A faint sound broke through the chaos. Drip. Fresh blood splattered onto the ground in crimson droplets. Seer panted, wiping a nosebleed from his face with the back of his hand. I can't keep playing this game of skill spamming with him. My energy reserves are going to run dry. If I hit empty, I won't even be able to fight anymore. And watching his movements with 6 eyes non-stop. It's exhausting my brain. Your eyes. They seem quite special. A voice suddenly sounded behind him. At the same moment, a tremendous force struck Seer from behind, sending him hurtling into the air. In midair, Seer curled his body and spun to dissipate the force of impact, landing gracefully back on the ground. Once again, HxH's figure vanished. This guy really excels at hit-and-run tactics, huh? The life energy representing HxH continued to flash around the battlefield, never staying in one place for long. Every location he passed was marked with traces of his pink nen. It wasn't just distracting, it was outright revolting. Yeah, no doubt about it. A nen user's strength is all about combat experience and strategy. And Seer was painfully aware that his combat experience didn't measure up to HxH's. Dozens of pink-tinged playing cards imbued with nen shot toward him again. Seer dodged the attacks with a series of agile leaps, each movement carrying him farther across the battlefield. Their skirmish expanded across an increasingly larger area. What are you using to track me? What exactly do your eyes see? HxH's voice echoed suddenly behind him, his approach completely silent yet unnervingly swift. But this time, Seer was ready. Without looking back, he released a burst of blue mid-spin, disappearing from his original location in an instant. Once again, HxH's energy signature vanished. A war of attrition, huh? This isn't good. Is it nen? Are you tracking me using nen? HxH's low, raspy voice taunted him, sticking to Seer like a shadow, relentless in his pursuit. Seer didn't bother responding, vanishing again to reappear at a safer distance. With his dwindling energy reserves and limited attack methods, he knew a prolonged fight would only tilt the scales against him. Are you a rat? You're pretty good at running away. I'm sick of it already. The white-haired boy's face remained impassive, but his words were razor-sharp. Meanwhile, his 6 eyes stayed locked on HxH's movements, refusing to let up. Drip. Blood continued to drip steadily from Seer's nose. He wiped at the blood absent-mindedly before collapsing onto the ground. The energy darting through the forest froze. HxH, who had been thoroughly enjoying himself, was momentarily stunned by the sight of his little apple bleeding from the nose and fainting mid-fight. It was as if the climactic fight had reached its peak, all the tension building to an explosive finale, only for the performance to be cut short abruptly, leaving HxH stuck in frustration. He even hesitated, tempted to step closer and examine the situation. After all, HxH took great interest in nurturing his chosen ones. Ah, there you are, Seer muttered as his eyes suddenly snapped open. Chapter 46. At some point, the small animals in the forest began to flee in all directions, while birds flapped their wings silently, soaring into the sky. Even the larger predators grew restless, running aimlessly like headless flies. The forest became eerily silent, almost deathly still. It was as if this calm heralded an impending catastrophe. Even the magical plants rooted in the ground quieted down, acting like ordinary vegetation, utterly motionless. A white-haired, blue-eyed boy sat casually beneath a tree. One leg lay flat, the other bent upward. His head hung low, his face obscured by the shadows cast by the leaves above. Suddenly, he pushed against the ground with one hand, rolling several times to avoid an unexpected projectile. As he looked up, he saw several playing cards embedded deeply in the ground, more than halfway buried. A red-haired man appeared, his movements seemingly unhurried, yet so swift it seemed he closed the distance in mere flashes, stopping just 10 meters from Seer. "Such a delicious fruit," the man said, his exaggerated grin stretching unnaturally wide. His deep, raspy voice betrayed a certain excitement. "Tch." Seer straightened up and clicked his tongue in irritation. "Play with me, won't you?" "Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha," Hisaka laughed, arms crossed, his entire body trembling with glee. Pink Nen energy silently emanated from him, stretching like highly elastic chewing gum, moving at incredible speed. The moment Seer sensed that energy, he retreated without hesitation, simultaneously raising his left hand. A formless slash burst forth. The strike collided with the pink Nen, severing it cleanly. Hisaka's face lit up with a thoughtful expression. "You can see my Nen. And even cut it." "Ha-hey," Hisaka chuckled again, his voice low and full of sinister delight. "You seem even tastier now." He ran his tongue over his upper lip. At the same time, even more pink Nen tendrils extended from Hisaka, stronger and denser than before. An invisible pressure blanketed the area within a 100-meter radius. Seer frowned, his figure leaping into the air as he snapped impatiently, "Don't treat me like one of your farm apples." As his words fell, several more slashes shot forth. The normally invisible Nen collided with Seer's formless strikes. Due to the unique properties of Hisaka's Nen, soft and elastic like rubber, no sound was produced when the two forces clashed. But this time, the slashes failed to cut through. "Can't slice it?" Seer furrowed his brow. "Ah, so elastic things are harder to sever with sharp attacks?" No. It was because Hisaka had strengthened his Nen. The potency of any attack, after all, depended on the user's energy output. Seer's current strength was heavily restricted. Without the ability to open a domain or use other offensive techniques, he was limited to relying solely on his current skill set. His capabilities felt incomplete. Hisaka stood still, his hands raised, manipulating the tendrils of Nen with his 10 fingers. "Very good. So very good." "Hey," the energy around Hisaka grew denser, his aura intensifying by the second. Seer raised his head, choosing not to dodge further and instead swiftly increased the distance between them. The area was saturated with Hisaka's Nen, visible through Seer's 6 eyes as an overwhelming swarm of pink energy tendrils. "Disgusting." "Blue." Seer raised his hands, dark blue cursed energy condensing in front of his palms. "Maximum output." The orb grew rapidly in size, pulling nearby objects, including Hisaka's embedded playing cards, into its gravitational field. The powerful force even caused their hair to stand on end. "Get lost." Seer hurled the orb toward Hisaka's position. The resulting explosion blasted a massive crater into the ground, erasing all traces of the Nen lingering in the vicinity. Even the surrounding trees were reduced to nothing but bare roots. But there was no sign of Hisaka in the pit. "Gone. He's fast." The life energy that represented Hisaka darted rapidly through the forest, concealed by the trees as he continuously changed positions. Locking onto him was impossible. This guy really is a nightmare to deal with. Seer raised his hand and unleashed another attack. Wherever Hisaka's life energy appeared, Seer sent a blast of cleave or blue flying toward it. Within a radius of 300 meters, trees fell one after another, yet Hisaka remained agile, his presence constantly flitting around. A faint sound broke through the chaos. Drip. Fresh blood splattered onto the ground in crimson droplets. Seer panted, wiping a nosebleed from his face with the back of his hand. I can't keep playing this game of skill spamming with him. My energy reserves are going to run dry. If I hit empty, I won't even be able to fight anymore. And watching his movements with 6 eyes non-stop. It's exhausting my brain. Your eyes. They seem quite special. A voice suddenly sounded behind him. At the same moment, a tremendous force struck Seer from behind, sending him hurtling into the air. In midair, Seer curled his body and spun to dissipate the force of impact, landing gracefully back on the ground. Once again, Hisoka's figure vanished. This guy really excels at hit-and-run tactics, huh? The life energy representing Hisoka continued to flash around the battlefield, never staying in one place for long. Every location he passed was marked with traces of his pink nen. It wasn't just distracting, it was outright revolting. Yeah, no doubt about it. A nen user's strength is all about combat experience and strategy. And Seer was painfully aware that his combat experience didn't measure up to Hisoka's. Dozens of pink-tinged playing cards imbued with nen shot toward him again. Seer dodged the attacks with a series of agile leaps, each movement carrying him farther across the battlefield. Their skirmish expanded across an increasingly larger area. What are you using to track me? What exactly do your eyes see? Hisoka's voice echoed suddenly behind him, his approach completely silent yet unnervingly swift. But this time, Seer was ready. Without looking back, he released a burst of blue mid-spin, disappearing from his original location in an instant. Once again, Hisoka's energy signature vanished. A war of attrition, huh? This isn't good. Is it nen? Are you tracking me using nen? Hisoka's low, raspy voice taunted him, sticking to Seer like a shadow, relentless in his pursuit. Seer didn't bother responding, vanishing again to reappear at a safer distance. With his dwindling energy reserves and limited attack methods, he knew a prolonged fight would only tilt the scales against him. Are you a rat? You're pretty good at running away. I'm sick of it already. The white-haired boy's face remained impassive, but his words were razor-sharp. Meanwhile, his 6 eyes stayed locked on Hisoka's movements, refusing to let up. Drip. Blood continued to drip steadily from Seer's nose. He wiped at the blood absent-mindedly before collapsing onto the ground. The energy darting through the forest froze. Hisoka, who had been thoroughly enjoying himself, was momentarily stunned by the sight of his little apple bleeding from the nose and fainting mid-fight. It was as if the climactic fight had reached its peak, all the tension building to an explosive finale, only for the performance to be cut short abruptly, leaving Hisoka stuck in frustration. He even hesitated, tempted to step closer and examine the situation. After all, Hisoka took great interest in nurturing his chosen ones. Ah, there you are, Seer muttered as his eyes suddenly snapped open. Chapter 47. This is Hisoka's personal channel. As you can see, our resident predator is currently pruning the branches of these trees. Seer narrated into his phone while recording, his commentary flowing smoothly with practiced ease. Suddenly, as if realizing something crucial, he stopped the recording midway. Wait, are the examiners still alive? His expression turned a bit peculiar. Hisoka had been on a killing spree along the way, and the remaining life energy signatures in the area all seemed pretty weak. There wasn't even a way to tell who was stronger or weaker, because they all looked equally feeble now. The only place where there seemed to still be some survivors was where the examiners were conducting the gourmet evaluation. I haven't technically passed the hunter exam yet, have I? Seer thought. If those examiners are dead, then my exam is over too. And this whole trip will have been pointless. Well, not entirely pointless. At least he'd successfully checked in with the legendary scenery of the Hunter x Hunter world, Hisoka himself. Though it wasn't during Hisoka's iconic post-bath scene, this check-in still counted. In fact, seeing him in person proved HxH was even more insane than in the anime. Experiencing something like the thrill of collecting signatures at a convention in another world. Not bad at all. Well then, I'll be heading off, Seer said, leaving behind the frenzied HxH and vanishing in a flash. In his current state, HxH would attack anything that got close. Seer didn't know how long this effect would last, but he was slightly curious about HxH's reaction once he regained clarity. Unfortunately, he wouldn't be around to see it. For now, the potentially dying examiners were more pressing. As he walked, Seer passed the corpses of many examinees, most of whom had died in the same manner, with playing cards lodged in their bodies. A few were still breathing but gravely injured. Without immediate medical attention, they wouldn't make it. Seer, however, paid them no mind, focused entirely on finding the examiners. Finally, he found 3 individuals, or rather, 1 examiner barely clinging to life and 2 corpses. This is bad. Only 1 left. Seer quickly rushed over to the sole surviving examiner, Hoshu, and began digging through his bag for medicine. He poured it into the examiner's mouth while cheering him on. "Hang in there, don't die on me just yet. At least wait until you announce me as qualified before kicking the bucket, alright? I'm definitely in first place with the treasure I found, right?" Seer propped open the guy's eyelids, forcing him to look at the loot Seer had brought along. He had taken all the treasure chests he'd seen next to the corpses of examinees along the way. Combined with the fact that no other examinees were left to compete with him, who else could possibly take first place? "Say something, examiner." Seer shook Hoshu's head urgently. "If you keep shaking him like that, he'll really die," a man's voice called out as someone leaped down from a nearby tree. The newcomer wore a long-sleeved hoodie with the hood up, his plain appearance so unremarkable that one might forget him the moment he left. His presence was almost ghost-like. "So, what's the deal with this exam? I've been taking it seriously, you know. It wouldn't be fair if someone else's rampage invalidated my effort," Seer said lazily, his tone void of enthusiasm as he glanced at the man. He wasn't surprised by the man's appearance. From the start of the exam, this guy had been shadowing him. Not just him, though, HxH, and even the 2 other non-human examinees, also had someone tailing them. He was probably part of the examiner team, assigned to keep tabs on dangerous participants. Wait a second. Seer thought. That has nothing to do with me. I'm not dangerous at all. Seer gave the idea some serious thought and concluded, he was incredibly harmless and friendly. Certainly not the type to warrant constant monitoring. It must be that he was too exceptional, which earned him the honor of being closely observed. If I don't pass, I'll be very upset, you know. The white-haired, blue-eyed boy sat cross-legged next to Hoshu's, his head propped on one hand as he lazily gazed downward, his eyes half-closed in a languid manner. In sharp contrast to his relaxed demeanor, a dangerous aura emanated from his entire being. Ready Yuno, one of the assistant examiners for the 286 Hunter exam, couldn't help but break into a cold sweat. Faced with this boy, he felt an unfamiliar sensation, fear. He had seen firsthand how Seer had fought against HxH. Even HxH had been forced to maintain his distance and continually shift positions to avoid Seer's relentless attacks. I should have known better than to take on this assistant examiner gig for a bit of extra pay, Reddy thought with regret. This is basically blood money. Most of the other assistant examiners were already dead. Reddy was only still alive because he'd been tailing Seer from the start and Seer hadn't bothered to deal with him. As for your performance, we've all seen it, Reddy explained cautiously, stepping back a couple of paces as he spoke. The footage has already been sent to the Hunter Association for review. Is that so? Seer rose to his feet, brushing off Hoshu without another glance. Seeing this, Reddy instinctively stepped back several more paces, silently praying, just let him pass already. If he comes back next year. Relax, Seer said with a faint smirk, glancing at him. If I wanted to kill you, you'd already be dead. For some reason, those words actually made Reddy feel a bit relieved. At least it meant Seer had no intention of killing him. I feel like I've forgotten something, Seer muttered, pausing where he stood to think. What had he forgotten? Congratulations, you've passed. Reddy answered a phone call with a serious expression, exchanged a few words with the person on the other end, then turned and addressed Seer. Oh, I just remembered, Marrow's missing, Seer said, a sudden realization dawning on him. Are there any survivors? Reddy couldn't help but ask. There are, about 20 or 30 people left, Seer replied calmly. That count included Marrow, Tunpa, the two non-human participants, and a few severely injured but not yet dead individuals. I need to find someone first. Wait here for me, the white-haired boy said. Before Reddy could respond, Seer's figure disappeared into thin air. 30 or so survivors, huh? Reddy muttered to himself, lost in thought. He decided it was best to call for help to retrieve the remaining living examinees. 3 minutes later, Seer found Marrow near the coastline. When Seer had told him to run far, Marrow had really run far. Sir. Marrow was leaning against a tree, his expression blank. Upon seeing the sudden appearance of the white-haired boy, he perked up and ran toward him excitedly. What should we do next? He asked, skipping any questions about the fight or offering any opinions, focusing solely on what came next. Hisaka killed a bunch of participants, most of the examiners are dead too, and the rest are too injured to move. If nothing unexpected happens, the only ones who passed this round are you and me, Seer said with a yawn. Grabbing Marrow by the collar, he then whisked them both back at high speed. Reddy, who had wisely stayed in place as instructed, watched them return without a word of complaint. Seer let go of Marrow, who stumbled slightly, looking dazed as he shook his head. When will we get our hunter licenses? Seer asked. Next, you'll need to board an airship to the final venue. The licenses are only issued after the interviews, Reddy explained promptly, relieved to see them back. Chapter 48. A Hunter Association airship had been parked in a remote part of the forest the entire time. Compared to the earlier chaos, the atmosphere was now much calmer. Only Seer, Marrow, and the auxiliary examiner boarded the airship. Of course, the barely breathing Hoshu was also dragged aboard. As the airship ascended into the sky, the forest below shrank in size. Sitting by the window, Seer gazed down and noticed the two non-human siblings standing at the edge of the continent. Without hesitation, they dove into the sea. Their bodies floated on the water's surface as the waves carried them away. Sir, here you go. Marrow handed Seer a cup of medicine and a large plate of desserts. Having Marrow around had visibly improved Seer's quality of life. Especially since Marrow had the uncanny ability to produce gold coins. 200 million jenny was already a lot. A personal assistant who didn't ask for a salary but instead handed over that money. It sounded like something no one would believe. Speaking of money, Seer pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contact list, which had a grand total of 2 numbers. He called one of them. The call was answered almost instantly. What's this? Missing us already after being gone for such a short time. The voice on the other end had a teasing tone. Seer ignored the remark and casually said, Hey, Pampas, lend me 10.8 billion jenny. I'll pay you back in a while. There was a brief silence on the other end. What did you just say? Weird, the signal here in Meteor City is as bad as ever. The man's voice trailed off, feigning confusion. Beep beep. The call ended abruptly. I guess Pampas doesn't have that kind of money either, Seer sighed as he stared at the disconnected call screen. It made sense. Asking someone to lend you that much money would probably have them questioning your sanity. What a hassle. If I can't get 10.8 billion, even 8 billion would be fine. Seer pocketed his phone and leaned back against the sofa, tilting his head to rest. At the very least, he needed to buy storage curse first. Sure, that curse looked like an oversized purple and black caterpillar, but it was useful. How much could he get if he used his hunter license as collateral for a loan? Some time after the airship left, Hisaka regained consciousness. Surveying the severely damaged surroundings, his expression showed a hint of innocent confusion. This was his doing? What happened after that fight with the little apple with those stunning eyes? Oh, right. It was his opponent's Nen ability. Not only could it attack, but it could also cause a complete loss of rationality. Already gone, huh? Hisaka's tone lacked any trace of disappointment, or anger, for that matter. Instead, it was unusually calm. Yet beneath that calm exterior, something seemed to simmer just below the surface. Inside Hisaka's mind, a massive toy box held a collection of dolls in various shapes and sizes. Among them was a doll marked with a cross on its forehead. Now, a new doll had been added, a white-haired, blue-eyed figure with black tattoos. He smiled, a glint of anticipation in his eyes. Looking forward to next time, my delicious little apple. Do your best to ripen into an even tastier fruit. Just don't rot. Come pick me up at the forest in Asian, Hisaka said as he took out his phone and made a call, giving instructions to the person on the other end. He took a few steps forward, his body finally experiencing a rare sense of fatigue. Muscles sore, and his mind somewhat sluggish, he appeared unusually subdued. This exhaustion gave him a blank expression, making him look more like an ordinary person for once. After walking a little further, he paused and fixed his gaze on a tree. Carved into its trunk was the following message. Keep pushing yourself. Strive to become someone more powerful and valuable. Don't turn into a rotten failure. Hisaka stared at the inscription, his expression frozen in stunned silence. I wonder when Hisaka will notice the message I left for him. The look on his face must be priceless. Sitting on the airship, Seer's voice carried a trace of regret, though his expression brimmed with mischievous glee. All this time, Hisaka had been telling others, become a more delicious fruit. Now Seer had turned the tables with a dose of poetic justice, strive to become a better person. What's the saying again? Return a man's trick right back at him, right? Seer remarked lazily. Did you really leave a message for that guy? Mero, the blonde figure standing behind Seer, asked curiously. Though there were empty seats available, he stubbornly chose to remain standing. Of course, Seer replied in a relaxed tone. In this world, Seer was most familiar with the characters that appeared in the original series. As someone who only watched the older version, and hadn't even finished it, but consumed a ton of fanfiction, Hisaka, Killua, Gon, Kurapika, and Illumi had left the deepest impressions on him. After all, these characters had the highest presence across countless fanworks. As for others, having not seen the later parts of the series and with their lower frequency in fanfics, Seer's familiarity with them was limited to a few videos he'd seen. This familiarity made his attitude toward these characters warmer than toward strangers. Meeting these characters in person, after all, was a once-in-a-lifetime chance for any hardcore otaku. Imagine the envy of fellow anime fans if he ever told this story. Even the Phantom Troop members, whom Seer had seen briefly in videos, only elicited lukewarm feelings. It took another week for the airship to reach the continent where the final exam venue was located. The days on board were uneventful and dull. So the moment the airship landed, Seer eagerly disembarked. The final exam venue was a hotel leased by the Hunter Association. Waiting at the hotel entrance were an elderly man with long eyebrows, a sparse ponytail, and an abundance of facial hair, a golden-haired man in a suit with a constant smile, and a short, egg-shaped man also wearing a suit. Seer's first impressions of the trio? A robust old man, a perpetually smiling schemer who seemed ready to usurp power at any moment, and a mascot? He quickly recognized the old man as Netero, the chairman of the Hunter Association. The egg-shaped man seemed to be one of the examiners, while the golden-haired man's persistent smile gave off vibes similar to Pampas. Another manipulation-type personality, perhaps? Either way, he didn't seem trustworthy. "This is Chairman Netero of the Hunter Association, and this is Vice Chairman Pariston Hill," explained Reddy, who had followed Seer off the airship, feeling compelled to introduce them for some reason. "Welcome to the final venue. I've heard that some unexpected incidents occurred during the exam, but it's wonderful to see someone has still managed to pass. Moreover, both of you are first-time candidates. How surprising and delightful." Chairman Netero's cheerful demeanor gave the impression of a kind and gentle grandfather. But Seer knew better. This man was the chairman of the Hunter Association, after all. And, with his 6 eyes, Seer could see that the old man's life energy was so vibrant it overshadowed everyone else around him. "What exactly happened during the exam?" Pariston, the golden-haired vice-chairman, asked with a gentle smile. "I heard one of you was directly involved in the incident. Could you tell us more about it in detail?" "No idea," Seer replied, shaking his head with an air of detachment. "It was just this and that, and then, well, almost everyone ended up dead. Life is such a fragile thing, isn't it?" Seer sounded wistful, but in truth, he had left the scene early and hadn't actually witnessed Hisoka's killing spree. Chapter 49. When Pariston heard Seer's response, his smile didn't falter. His gaze shifted from the white-haired boy to the blonde figure standing 3 steps behind him. "I don't know anything," Mero said, shaking his head under Pariston's scrutiny. "I see. I was hoping to learn something from the 2 of you, the only survivors," Pariston replied, still smiling. "Has the interview started already? If you've got questions, hurry up and ask. I'm very busy," the white-haired, blue-eyed boy said lazily, his impatience apparent. He was, after all, busy planning how to make money to buy pets and weapons. Every wasted minute was money slipping through his fingers. "Oh ho ho, seems like you're in a rush." Netero, the chairman, chuckled. His warm, grandfatherly smile was nothing like Pariston's unsettling grin. "The interview should be conducted indoors. Come with me," he said, hands clasped behind his back as he walked ahead at a leisurely pace. From his posture and demeanor, he looked like nothing more than a regular old man. "This has nothing to do with me, so I'll take my leave, Chairman Netero," Pariston said with a cheerful tone, remaining where he stood. Netero simply waved him off without saying anything. Seer and Mero followed Netero into a private room. Inside, pink curtains and green leather sofas made up the decor. The strange color combination drew an involuntary twitch from Seer's mouth, but he ultimately ignored the design. He pulled out a chair and sat down directly. Mero stood behind Seer's chair, handing him a cup of tea. "Brew this," Seer said, pulling a health-replenishing potion out of his backpack and handing it to Mero. Without sparing a glance at the others in the room, Mero meticulously rinsed the teacup 3 times with hot water before pouring the potion into it. Netero watched the scene unfold with an amused smile. Only when Seer sipped the concoction did he speak. "What do you think of Hisoka Moro as a candidate?" "Huh? Why ask about that guy?" "Well," Seer thought, "Hisoka is relatively normal when he's not being a complete psychopath. But most of the time, he is a deranged, battle-crazed maniac." "He's a diligent farmer," Seer replied after some thought, his tone utterly serious. For a moment, the room fell into a peculiar silence. If anyone wondered what irrelevant answers looked like, this was it. "What were your thoughts when fighting him?" Netero pressed further. "His abilities? Sticky and kind of gross," Seer replied, setting down his cup and resting a finger on his chin. Despite calling it gross, a cryptic smile played on his lips. "I see," Netero said, nodding in understanding. Even though Seer's answers were largely meaningless, Netero didn't seem bothered. Any response from a candidate reflected a part of their personality. And Seer's responses implied something interesting. He wasn't particularly repulsed by Hisoka's methods, even after their recent intense battle. What an intriguing newcomer, Netero thought. Hunters were inherently willful people, and this boy seemed like a natural fit for the title. "What's your hunting goal?" Netero asked next. Every hunter needed a purpose, a rule established by none other than Isaac Netero himself. "Right now, money," the white-haired, blue-eyed boy said nonchalantly. Hunting for money was a common enough reason for becoming a hunter. But from the way Seer carried himself, he didn't seem like someone who lacked funds, more like someone who didn't care about wealth at all. "And you?" Netero turned to the blond boy. "Mero Perlicia, a member of the Perlicia family, one of the world's largest mafia organizations. Although the Hunter Association doesn't restrict candidates based on their background, candidates like this were still rare. I want to become a top-notch gourmet hunter and create even more delicious food," the blond boy said with a calm smile, his gaze meeting Netero's directly. However, whenever his eyes turned toward the white-haired boy, his gaze would drop slightly. This implied that, in Mero Perlicia's mind, the white-haired boy, Seer, held a status even higher than Netero's. A member of a mafia family with a dream of becoming a gourmet hunter? It was as peculiar as hearing that a member of the Zoldyck assassin family aspired to contribute positively to society. Awkward. But undeniably intriguing. "I see. Well then, congratulations, you both passed," Netero said decisively, stroking his beard. "Ah, finally over," Seer said, standing up and stretching. "By the way, how much could a hunter's license fetch if pawned?" "It should fetch a considerable amount, but oh ho ho, this old man doesn't know the exact figure," Netero replied vaguely, dodging the question with a laugh. "All right." Seer yawned, clearly not pressing the matter further. On January 11, 1998, after finishing the exam and enduring the lecture from the mascot bald examiner, Seer successfully obtained his hunter's license. Most of the credit for this achievement, however, went to Hisoka, who had significantly shortened the exam duration. After obtaining the license, Seer and Mero didn't linger in the hotel the Hunter Association had provided. Instead, they packed up and left immediately. "Where can we make quick money?" Seer muttered, standing amidst the bustling streets and deep in thought. In the original story, the Heavens Arena seemed like a good option. It was said that fighters could earn over 2 billion jenny in total by reaching either the 190th or 200th floor. Additionally, during matches, bets were placed, and it was possible to gamble on who would win. If Seer and Mero fought their way to the 190th floor, they could earn 4 billion jenny, and with additional bets along the way. Perhaps a trip to the Heavens Arena could secure enough money to purchase that pet. "We're going to the Heavens Arena," Seer decided without hesitation. Mero, of course, had no objections and eagerly accepted the decision. In Mero's mind, the master he followed was the strongest of all. Even the chairman of the Hunter Association was merely old. If his master wanted to, he could undoubtedly become the chairman as well. Thus, every decision made by such a powerful master had to be correct. The two quickly purchased tickets for the next airship and headed toward the Heavens Arena. The Heavens Arena was the fourth tallest building in the Hunter world, standing 991 meters tall with 251 floors. There was a designated landing area for airships, and the daily foot traffic exceeded tens of thousands. Each match had a sizable audience, cheering loudly or booing from the stands. Even for newcomers, there would be spectators in the crowd either rooting for them or jeering. As for matches above the 200th floor, tickets were so sought after they needed to be fought over. It was fair to say that the Heavens Arena was a place where money flowed in by the millions daily. "This is my first time here. So many people," Mero muttered as he glanced around. The moment they stepped through the main entrance, they were greeted by a multitude of people dressed in various martial arts uniforms. At the front desk, there was already a long line of people registering for their matches, stretching all the way to the door. In the nearby lounge area, many participants who had finished registering were seated, waiting for announcements about their matches. Waiting in line was boring. Seer had no interest in standing around. With Mero in tow, Seer casually cut to the very front of the line, ignoring the dark and furious glares from the people behind them. He filled out the registration form and handed it to the receptionist, who was already accustomed to such behavior and maintained her flawless professional smile. "There are no special rules for the matches. You may use any method you wish, as long as you defeat your opponent within the allotted time, you will be declared the winner. Please wait in the lounge area for a while. We will arrange your first match shortly," the receptionist said politely. Chapter 50. The group of people who had been cut in line were still glaring daggers at Seer and Mero, openly and covertly attempting to kill them with their eyes. Seer, however, was completely unfazed and ignored them entirely. Mero, on the other hand, seemed a bit nervous. Walking down a corridor, they had not yet reached the end, but the glow of light at the exit was already visible, accompanied by faint, excited cheers. The moment they stepped out, the cheers amplified tenfold. This single arena alone housed 16 different fighting rings, surrounded by spectator seats on all four sides, capable of accommodating tens of thousands of people simultaneously. At the moment, the seats were already nearly filled. The two found a spot as close to the rings as possible and sat down. "Looks like I'm number 1999. Seer glanced at his participant number. Judging by the numbering, it seemed that thousands of people competed here every day. "I'm number 2000, Mero reported, clutching his registration slip tightly. "Relax. Before the 200th floor, everyone you'll face is weak," Seer said casually, waving his hand dismissively as he glanced at the visibly nervous Mero. On all 16 rings, matches were ongoing, and the contestants rotated quickly. In Seer's eyes, it was nothing more than a bunch of weaklings pecking at each other. None of them seemed any better than the others, he hadn't even seen anyone capable of using Nen. They weren't worth paying attention to. Even with his 6 eyes, Seer couldn't detect anyone with significant life energy in the vicinity, though there were a few notable presences on the floors above the 200th level. "Indeed, they are weak compared to you, my lord," Mero agreed with a nod. This exchange drew yet more angry glares toward them. These two young guys sure had big mouths. What did they mean by saying everyone below the 200th floor was weak? Were they looking down on everyone here? "Contestant 2000 and Contestant 2033, please report to Ring C." The announcement blared through the speakers. Mero stood up nervously. "My lord, I'm heading up." "Yeah," Seer replied absent-mindedly, waving a hand without even glancing toward the ring. He wasn't about to waste his time watching weaklings fight. He'd much rather spend that time contemplating his own Nen ability. If 3 identical cards of the same attribute were used simultaneously, they could unleash their maximum effect. However, if he wanted the freedom to choose all 3 cards, what kind of price would he have to pay? Nen was a power that allowed its users to achieve almost anything, as long as they set appropriate restrictions and vows. However, those restrictions and vows had to be balanced and feasible. Seer needed a certain level of control to choose his cards, but the price he paid couldn't be too steep. At the moment, he didn't have the kind of determination that came from life or death situations or deep-seated hatred. Those were the circumstances under which people were usually willing to pay any price. But Seer? His life here was going quite smoothly. He wasn't desperate, nor did he harbor any vendettas. He needed to carefully consider what price would be most appropriate. Contestant 2000, Mero, is a first-time competitor, just 18 years old, while contestant 2033 is a professional martial artist. The announcer's voice boomed through the microphone with excitement. Let's take a look at their win probabilities. The large screen displayed the profiles of both contestants, along with their betting odds beneath. Mero's odds were a staggering 3.0. The match began, and the burly man on the opposite side landed a heavy punch square on the golden-haired youth's face, sending him sprawling to the ground. Contestant 2000 is knocked down by contestant 2033 with a single punch. Point awarded to contestant 2033. With 10 points, contestant 2033 will be declared the winner. Mero quickly steadied himself and stood back up. Contestant 2000 is back on his feet. The announcer exclaimed, his voice brimming with enthusiasm as he narrated the match. 2000? Wasn't that Mero's number? Sear's brow twitched, and he lazily lifted his eyes to glance at the ring. Contestant 2033 was a massive man, standing over 2 meters tall. Mero looked like a schoolboy facing off against an adult. But still, that was no excuse for Mero to be knocked down with a single punch. Right? Sear rested his chin on one hand, observing the fight with disinterest. Contestant 2033 launches another attack, but contestant 2000 dodges. The announcer continued narrating the match. Contestant 2000 initiates an attack. Contestant 2033 counters with an elbow strike. A beautiful move, 2 points awarded. The scorekeeper declared loudly. The crowd erupted into cheers for 2033. Though Mero had taken a hit, the opponent's punches hadn't caused him any real harm. As expected. If a single punch from his opponent could leave a lasting mark on Mero, Sear thought, I'd be speechless. I can't take this anymore, Sear sighed and lazily called out toward the ring. Hey, Mero. The blond youth on the platform turned toward the voice. Sitting among the spectators, the white-haired boy gazed back with an expression of utter boredom and fatigue. Watching you fight is making me sick. Just end this boring charade already, he instructed nonchalantly. Mero's movements on the ring still seemed hesitant, and progress was slow. Can't do it? The white-haired, blue-eyed boy asked, his expression filled with disdain. If you can't, forget it. It just proves you're nothing but a useless weakling. A weakling who can only cook has no right to stay by my side, Sear said casually, though his words dripped with scorn. I have to prove to him. I'm not a weakling. Mero clenched his fists tightly. The truth was, his opponent wasn't that strong, and he wasn't as weak as he thought. After all, the other guy still hadn't been able to beat him after all this time. So why couldn't he be the winner? He refused to be seen as a weakling and left behind. You've been using it well all along, haven't you? That ability. Sear spoke slowly. Control it and channel it through your fist. Don't understand? The white-haired boy let out a soft sigh, as if disappointed. Ability? Mero thought. Was Sear referring to the technique the gourmet hunter had taught him? Control it. Channel it through my fist. Mero raised his fist. Contestant 2000 counters. He knocks contestant 2033 down with one punch. The announcer's voice carried a note of astonishment. 1, 2, 3. Contestant 2033 fails to get up in time. The winner is contestant 2000. The announcer declared loudly. The audience, shocked by the unexpected outcome, fell silent. Or perhaps, Sear mused, it was because most of them had bet on 2033 to win. Now that they had lost their money, they couldn't find it in themselves to cheer. Mero returned to his seat but didn't sit down. Instead, he stood beside Sear and bowed deeply. I'm sorry, my lord. My performance must have disappointed you. Seer glanced at him briefly before looking away. He wasn't exactly disappointed. After all, he had known from the beginning that Mero wasn't particularly strong. If he were, Seer wouldn't have mocked him so much in the first place. What was surprising, though? Taking so long to deal with someone who can't even use Nen is pretty embarrassing, Seer sneered. Mero could use Nen, Seer had known that from the moment he first saw him. But apparently, aside from basic 10 enhancement, Mero didn't seem to know any other techniques. Because the hunter I met before only taught me how to keep my aura from leaking. He didn't teach me anything else, Mero muttered softly, head bowed. Well, you sure met an unreliable teacher, Seer mocked with a sneer. Teaching someone just how to prevent aura leakage so they can endure getting beaten up better. Truly useless. Contestant 1999 and Contestant 2064, please proceed to Ring A, the broadcast announced. Seer stood and began walking toward the ring. Good luck, my lord. Mero called out, his eyes shining as he watched the boy approach the platform. Contestant 2064 was a burly man, standing about 185 centimeters tall. Dressed in martial arts attire, his face bore a long, jagged scar that added to his menacing appearance. So, you're with that 2000 kid, huh? That guy lucked out to beat his opponent, but you won't be so fortunate. You brats should just go home crying like the kids you are, he jeered, arms crossed. How dare he speak to my lord like that? Mero clenched his fists tightly, glaring at the man with dark intensity from the sidelines. Contestant 1999 seems to be another newcomer, accompanying Contestant 2000. This is also his first match. The announcer remarked. And now, the match begins. The white-haired boy stood with a blank expression, looking as though he might fall asleep at any moment. He didn't react to his opponent's taunts, nor did he say a word. But the moment the announcer declared the match started, Seer vanished from sight. In the blink of an eye, the burly man was sent flying across the ring, slamming into the wall of the outer boundary with such force that it left a cracked, crater-like indentation. All that noise. You're annoying, the white-haired, blue-eyed boy muttered coldly, one hand resting casually on the back of his neck while the other hung naturally by his side. His expression was indifferent. The audience fell into stunned silence for a moment before erupting into wild, thunderous cheers.